Usually we have
Yu-Gi-Oh!
comments by now.
Oh, Fun Strikes Back. That's us. I was confused.
Yeah, that that was referencing. We mentioned it
Yeah,
earlier.
you sent me that thing about, was it Yale
Stanford,
or Stanford? One of those schools.
Stanford elected a student government that their whole entire thing was to say "Fun Strikes Back," and they got elected by like 20% or something like that. And
This little he demands
just a tool.
the main camera.
Flip's informed. I'm neutral and unbiased. The most neutral and unbiased. And we got Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh's not participating. You hear Charlie back there? Charlie's he's working. I got him like this little thing of he has to figure out this trap to get to his treats, and it's the only thing I can give him to not be driving me crazy. But he'll figure it out in 2 minutes too. But you can hear it back there.
All right. Well, you can take Yu-Gi-Oh's little bed off until he sits down.
I'll try to put him back on if he gets into position right again. I'll keep an eye on there. Although when I change screens, I'm never looking back here. That's why I goof up sometimes. I need to get a double screen.
That's why you spend like an hour with you guys in the corner with just some random thing on the main screen half the time.
Yeah, because I don't even see. I don't know what's going on. But I need to get a double screen. I used to do better when I do it in my office, but I don't like to do it in my office because we could get canceled.
Yeah, well, won't say don't say anything else about that.
Yeah. I was thinking about that you are both simultaneously bulletproof, more bulletproof than we are, and more canceled than we are.
How do you figure? What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of times you get away with stuff, or you still get invited on with RFM and Bill Real and all those guys and all that. But at the same time, too, you have a reputation that has people say stuff and come in, and I mean, we just saw it on a TikTok video, and people make their claims about what you are phobic of.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch the RFM that they did live call-in.
You didn't watch that one? He did. Well,
No.
I mean, he was there.
Nobody managed to call in and get me a zinger. Try to embarrass me on air. I'm sure it'll be fun. It'll happen at some point.
You thought they
might? No, I saw the one that you were on. I saw the Wood Tools one you did. Didn't you call in yesterday?
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
I had just made a comment in the live chat, and they read that question online. It wasn't. I mean, he handled it, as eloquently as he does. He's Dan. He's the McClellan.
He dodged it. I mean, he acted humble about it for the first time in his life, right there.
Are we going to cover it? Maybe I can just see it that way.
Yeah, I have it. I mean, it was real quick, but that's actually kind of the general idea of stuff I wanted to talk about. Is kind of
he's good at that. Of just very quickly doing like little, linguistic sleight of hand, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
And makes people jump up.
If it was some TikToker kid or some evangelical, he'd lied into him or something. But because it's on that channel or it's Jonathan, he's gonna give this kind of humble answer like, "Oh yes, of course." And I actually have this little thing right.
I doubt
here.
He knows who I am or is.
I think he does.
I don't.
I think he does.
I wonder.
Because you've talked to him a couple times directly on the Facebook. You were on our RFM last week. Although who knows if he watches that.
I don't get the sense that he is in the ex-Mormon media watching brigade.
He doesn't spend a lot of time arguing with them, but I think that's because he purposefully. I don't think it means he doesn't watch it. I think he purposely dodges that area because he doesn't want to do Mormon apologetics.
Yeah,
you could obviously see he was getting uncomfortable with that when they turned to that at that, and that's always been a curiosity, and I have to admit that I do some level of mind reading into that, but my mind reading is all pretty cynical about why he does that, but. Who knows? Maybe
I don't know. As soon as you run for public office, like, how seriously can I take you?
And that really all of your conclusions, you're not embarrassed about your Democratic Blue Church conclusions, but you are embarrassed or very cautious about your Mormon conclusions if you have them. I just don't buy that. And it seems like, I don't know, I would like to ask RFM or Bill Real that there's like some sort of pre-agreement to not directly ask him his faith or something like that. And
like it would be interesting. I really wonder, like, how does Dan McClellan's Temple recommend interview go?
Yeah, but not that it matters that much, except that, like, I would think that Mormons would care if he's actually kind of a believer or not. And I think he winked so many times last night. He winked. You saw him winking, like, well, their apologetics weren't very good, or they got a lot of stuff wrong, or and that sort of thing. And he'd say, "Oh, Jesus didn't come back yet. I wonder why." He says stuff like that, and you're like, "Come on, guy, like, stop pretending at it," And but
Brother McClellan, do you pay your rent honestly? I don't have to pay rent. I live rent free in the heads of the Porch Time Bros.
He does, but it's because I've actually got a clip, but it might be too long, so I won't play. I could play the whole thing, but I want to make a case of why he lives rent free in my head, because he's the archetype of the thing that he's the archetype of the thing that made me exit Blue Church. The same way ex-Mormons sit around with the church in their head, they leave it and can't leave it alone. I left Dan McClellan land and can't leave it alone.
Yeah. I mean, my case is just like, I don't care who you are. I'm concerned about authoritarians. I'm not going to ignore you. Because that's giving in. That's that mid-level violence thing that James Lindsay was talking about. It's like this weird guy is doing Marxist entryism into the Mormon church. Like, I'm not going to say nothing.
Yeah. Well, and then there's this level of Jonathan kind of started making the point to RFM and Bill, and they just don't get it. And then it's still not enough. That little bit that came up, it's like, you got to make the case of the trickery that they're playing, and it's tough to make that case quickly. And I have somebody who made the case, and it talks exactly about Dan, but I'll pull it up, but maybe it'll get too long-winded. But it would tie all into all the Dan stuff, and then even the Contrapoint stuff, and then even Kara and those guys talking about their cynical takedowns, or satirical, that Mormons can't be satirical and mocking, but they can be, or whatever.
Yeah, I listened to a little bit of Kara today, and she talked about how, like, satire can be an important tool, blah, blah, blah. I'm just wondering, like, so what about satirizing trans people? Or does that cause harm?
You can't punch down. They, of course, talked about the downy punchy, uppy punchy. But I don't know. What's it feel like to you, Jonathan? I've always wondered, like, some of these people have praised you and really looked up to you. And does it ever, like, make you feel queasy that if we start poking and dunking on them or anything like that? Not that. Am I frozen?
Did he freeze?
Frozen.
No, he
Jonathan's
froze.
frozen.
I don't really see that. I just kind of talk into a camera and then go about my day. So I don't really see much of that. As far as, like, Tanner and Sam and Zelf on the Shelf. Number one, I hate them. They're terrible, terrible people. They're the worst people
I guess
ever.
he's not worried about it.
The reason I hate them, though, is because I was working really, really hard, writing blog post stuff, just starting video thing, and it was really tough to create content. And I worked really hard for years, and I built up an audience of I got 1,000 people. It's putting content. These guys come out, and in a week, they have 3 times as much of an audience as I did. And rather than doing a bunch of really in-depth research and stuff, they just do some little pithy sketch based on junior high level humor.
A sketch that borrowed from you.
Sometimes, okay, that's fine. But I don't even care. But the thing is, they come from a media background that's they were in college and had their jobs and doing that stuff. And so they have a facility with it that I am jealous of. And so,
part of their facility is their lack of shame. So you shouldn't feel bad about having a sense of honor, because part of the reason their stuff is popular because it's lowest common denominator. It's easy.
Some of us they took the Mormon Stories boost too, and you've never taken a boost from it.
Yeah. There's a little bit of that. I think.
Is he frozen again?
Yeah. It's those Republican Texas.
He was having power
jumpstart the conversation and make sure that there's more content out there is helpful. I think you guys might be losing me. I don't know, the network's messing up.
Yeah, you come in and out, but we got your back right now.
Yeah. the thing is, like, Tanner is brilliant. Like, when you look at some of the creative stuff he originally did, from the first poem, the kind of spoken word poem that he brought out, to some of the music videos, he's got a creative mind. He's got a lot of insight, and I resonated with a lot of his own journey. He went through kind of the libertarian-ish pathway, and he just got a little bit derailed, and he, I would have preferred him to maybe delve a little bit more into his cult research, because maybe he'd have a little more insight into the groupthink dynamics that are going on in the secular realm. But I still, with the exception of his laugh, he's a jovial person and he laughs all the time, but his laugh for some reason just hits that nerve in my ear. It's hard to listen to. But I don't know. I have hope for him.
I hear what you say. When he talks, he's able to hedge stuff and even kind of throw ideas to the other side, or more of like the universal concept of people getting wild with ideas and whatnot. But it always still seems to always lean back towards, it's kind of one of the points that I want to make, that it's, well, if it still has the lefty telos in the end of stuff, it's okay. If you get there someday, even if I can sometimes throw you a bone that maybe you're not exactly correct as I am yet. But he does hedge off. I mean, just this week, I listened to 2 of their things. I listened to one where he's with Kara, and I listened where he was on with Sam, and they were talking about the Buddhists, and they did some hedging on both of them, even more hedging than I normally hear. Them saying, well, it could be. He even mentioned Stalinism could get bad and get nutty and stuff like that. And then he appealed to some liberalism. He appealed to some Jonathan Haidt and some that you need both conservatives and liberals. But then, of course, there's other conclusions right after all that too.
I think Karen mentioned today that, like, it's just one of those many times that she, like, I don't know, mask off. I don't, that dumb term. But, she talks about, like, when I was Mormon and I was blocking people, because they disagreed with me. And I'm like, no, that was you. Like, that wasn't Mormons. That was you. I never blocked anybody when I was a Mormon. I never had that weird compunction to not listen to people who disagree with me that you still have.
Yeah.
She's always dropping, obviously she's not self-aware, but she's always dropping those little hints about, like, oh, when I was Mormon and I was a giant piece of shit. And like, no, that was you.
Charlie, you already figured your thing out, and now you're already back here. Is Yu-Gi-Oh back in the picture yet?
No, he's probably off hiding Tootsie Rolls somewhere. Yu-Gi-Oh, you're terrible. Oh wait, we got to do the what are you drinking? That's what.
Are you drinking? I thought you didn't really drink.
What?
I'm drinking
He's having
Budlight.
Beer.
She said that once, or just not much. I mean, do you drink much?
Oh, I have a terrible drinking problem. You can clip that. No, I only pull it out for when I'm on stream with y'all, just because it's a part of the community.
It's part of what it is. Here, this
I always learn from Flip every time.
This is what I'm drinking. I'm drinking this.
Found in a community where a handshake is a short hunt.
This
brewed for those who found opportunity and challenge.
Did they put this all together?
They did it in like 2 days.
Yeah, I really wonder, like, because some of it I wonder is, like, is it B-roll from, like, other ads?
I'm sure it is.
Oh,
we collected B-roll footage, stock footage from our archives,
and there's like something like
pieced them together.
Put together the dead opposite of Dylan Mulvaney in 2 days.
To me, this like so many. There was so many memes, so many jokes, so many ripping, so many. I think it was on Joe
Rogan though. Said like this looks like Chat GPT. It was like like the Budweiser guys like quick. We need a conservative message.
This Baudrillardian moment was the funniest bit of the whole entire thing. Like when this video came out, I was out loud laughing. Like, just like.
I don't know. It's just, and for me, it's just a weird thing where it's like, okay, because I guess they were losing market share, but like, okay, it's beer. Focus on it. You want it in your face, like put it in your mouth because it's good beer. Like that's what you do, and you'll be okay. Like I've always said about pissing me off about Major League Soccer. It's like stay out of politics. Your job is soccer. Play good soccer. I'll watch. I don't need moral lessons from my professional soccer team. I just don't. All I need is goals.
I need to know that they're ideologically aligned.
Exactly. Well, I just
so
saw
what are
like,
you
they
guys
might
drinking?
be Giants. Like They Might Be Giants has been one of my favorite bands forever and ever and ever, and they still are. I love them.
Yeah,
But like
I
John
like
Flansburgh just put out like just a reminder for those who need to hear it. Trans rights are human rights. It's like, yeah, oh my god.
I try to not let it. It does. Sometimes I feel
Like
it, but I try to
Wilco
not let
did
it.
it.
Wilco's my favorite, my favoriteest, and even Nels Klein is just the best guitarist ever. And every other day he'll put up some sort of screed, and I'll just go, shut up, please. I love you too much, but I still love his playing. Tanner's laugh. I'm gonna.
By the way, Jonathan.
Oh, okay.
What kind?
It's from New York. It's the very end of the bottle, and I don't know if we'll ever get it again because the state discontinued it, which is stupid because it's really, really good.
I'm drinking a sealed Fresca.
I too can swirl my bottle.
Well, but then you'll lose your bubbles.
I'm from Texas, so I drink a beer named after
that's warm.
A revolver.
Nobody's celebrating this.
Lager?
Anybody celebrating the 420s?
Oh, I forgot.
You're
I've
not
way
into
back
that
on
right
that
now,
stuff.
but, right? You're chilling on.
Wait, so that beer, what kind of beer is it? Like,
It's a Texas ale, blood and honey.
Oh my
blood
gosh.
orange peel, Texas honey and spice, wheat, barley,
that's
hops,
as
yeast.
gay as a beer from Texas can get, and still be.
Just shut up! This is my beer.
No,
I'm not gonna lie.
I like fruit. That sounds really good. I have no problem with putting juice in beer. That's a good combination.
That's right.
I'm not gonna lie. Flip knows this. Like, I don't have strong tastes in alcohol, and if there was something I generally just kind of get, it would be a dumb Bud Light. And now I can't do that. I can't save with the lead, and I can't. So I buy stuff that still goes to that company and feel better about myself, but somehow they still own that whatever other brand I buy.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. Is that especially when it comes to alcohol, like 95% of things are on the shelves come down to like 5 companies.
Yeah,
it's
they
really nuts.
On Lotus Eaters and Vivek Ramaswamy, they've had a couple podcasts this week where they run through the list of all the companies that are inside of those
Jim Beam
ESG funds.
The famous American Jim Beam is the company is Beam Suntory. It's entirely owned by the Japanese.
Maybe I just gotta become an alcoholic on that. I heard something about Heineken too. That maybe Heineken's not.
Because Miller is owned, I think, in South Africa. Because it's Saab Miller, South African Brewing bought Miller. Like, it gets insane. Anheuser-Busch is based in Belgium. Like, that's the other thing that's so hilarious about this. Like, oh, we're an American company, American brand. It's like, oh, kinda.
We're American globalists.
Watch this horse run all over the world.
We're American cosmopolitans. That's how we do it around here.
Yeah, like, I really want to see like that, because I know they sell Budweiser in China. What does the Budweiser for China ad look like?
Well, sexy woman, Budweiser. Let's see here. So this right here is a good little essay, and it's all about. It starts with Hogwarts because current day you got to take all of your morals from the current actual Bible, the book that we use for all of our morals. But what was I going to say? Dang it,
well, how brilliant is it that J.K. Rowling was able to create a book that was so complex with moral issues that people have been able to lean into it as a source of some sort of moral authority, or at least something to compare, a standard by which to look at things.
Yeah.
What's funny too is like if you get in one of these like post-ironic guys, they first got to start out dunking it like, I know Harry Potter. I shouldn't do Harry Potter. I'm cooler than this, and then they just go ahead and do it for an hour.
I don't know.
And bless them for it.
Yeah,
Harry Potter was great storytelling. It's not fine literature. It was really good storytelling. Things got really loose at the end, but okay, whatever. We like characters.
It got really loose after the end.
Well,
the first part of this,
I really felt like the last 2 movies and the last book were just a whole lot of buying time. I don't know what else.
I don't know, man. That's when all the Horcrux hermetic stuff came together, and
Well, no, but I mean, it's just like it's a lot of like, they waited around wondering what to do. Well, that's gripping.
The first
stuff.
little bit of this, he asked like an interesting question of what of Malfoy's life after the end, right?
Oh.
Like, what do you do with Slytherin after the story? You know, and it's kind of like
yeah,
you can't go back to school and they say, hey, let's do some stuff that celebrates Slytherin and let them grow and put out some of their ideas sometimes and oh, today's the day of the Slytherin leader. Let's celebrate him. Or does it have to get like current day cancel culture and say we must condemn all old Slytherin stuff?
What if they had to do like the Hogwarts equivalent of denazification?
Yeah, exactly. But then, so you had Death Eaters. So Death Eaters and Slytherin are separate, right? But is the average new millennial young kid going to separate the difference between a Slytherin and a Death Eater? No, they're just going to see them as the same. And it's an interesting question. So then he goes in this part, and the reason I want to pull it up is because to me, this is just kind of the perfect description of what I try to get at with Dan. It's a little bit long. I don't know if I'll get through it. I'll put it on faster speed. How fast can we handle? 1.5?
1.5, I think, is the fastest that's reasonable.
Okay.
Witness the close.
I always have to slow it down when you guys get to these parts because I listen to you at
Part 2.
twice as speed.
Oh, yeah.
Professor McManus and the last academic. As a reader might have guessed, all of this blabber about Harry Potter and Slytherin is a not too subtle way to segue to a broader story about the modern academy's decline. At the risk of displaying resentment, as the lefties call it, I do have to admit a certain type of personal animus towards the modern academy. As a right-winger, people always accuse you of hate, but the only group I ever felt spite towards was my own class of white progressive academics. I suppose no hatred is ever justified, even if I do believe that my native people's hubris is responsible for most of the world's problems. Still, at an emotional level, it feels like I have a right to this resentment. After all, the modern academy was the world that created me. I was the son of 2 university lecturers, raised in a university town, and spent an embarrassing amount of my young adult life pursuing postgraduate degrees. And for the longest time, in my early adolescence, I idolized academia, even hoping that I would someday become a professor of some humanities subject. Pursuing the life of the mind and great ideas wherever they led. What always enchanted me about academics, at least of my parents' generation, was how much they loved ideas. They believed in them in a way that I found enthralling, even to witness, no matter how kooky the professor in question. Of course, I don't want to insinuate that this phenomenon was the undiluted pursuit of knowledge. There was an enormous amount of ego in this all. The academic was typically in love with his idea, but the center of the academic pursuit was still the idea itself, the knowledge, the belief, and the pursuit of truth. Yet something is quite different in my own generation of academics, especially in humanities and related fields. I could sense this change first in undergrad, and by the end of my PhD, I was thoroughly disillusioned.
Yeah, part of what I'm pointing at this is because we're going to get to Jonathan's question that he was able to get off to Dan, and I wanted to ask a follow-up question, and I tried to call in. I showed you guys I was trying to call in. I just got a busy signal.
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, like, everything this guy said so far, like, really hits home with me, because, like, I used to really romanticize that idea of being like a humanities professor. Just like, wouldn't it be great to just pursue ideas professionally? Yeah. But then the same thing was like, I never even went to college, but it was enough. I mean, I shouldn't say I never went to college. I never finished college, but like my experience in college, and then just I kept meeting grad students and PhDs from the humanities, and like the more I met, because the first time you're like, well, okay, you're one of the weird ones. But then I started to realize, like, oh wait, like this is what it makes. This is what it produces.
Yes, exactly, and it's part of what I'm doing, and part of what I'm pointing at is Dan will appeal to his expertise, which is, Jonathan asked him, like, how do you know that your worldview isn't just another worldview if you're going to be so postmodern about it? But then the other thing they'll appeal to is their consensus and expertise. But that's the next question is, consensus of what? You are the guy who points to time frames of ideological dominance. Like, he talks about this time frame, the ideological dominance of everybody who were thinkers all thought this. So if that's true of the past, the Foucauldian concept is always like, well, you're just in another one of those right now. Yeah. And you guys are just a bunch of ideologically aligned you. So Dan, you kind of appealing to the consensus is you appealing to you and just you, really, because there's just a specific.
Well, no, I mean, like, cause like it's the thing I keep bringing up about him is like it's not a coincidence that all of his scholarly opinions are entirely in line with present day leftist ideology. It's like magic.
And then if you appeal to scholarly expertise or scholarly like consensus, it's still just appealing to that one hive mind.
And that's the thing, though, that like, because like I directly compare him to the Bible geek, because a lot of the stuff that I see, like, I don't actually watch him that closely, because a lot of his Bible scholarship is stuff like, frankly, I already heard the Bible geek say this. only he said a lot more. And the Bible geek clearly has a political bias. Like, you know, when he gets into his politics, like there's been a lot of times where like, you know, I really feel like it's amazing that like, you know, you talk about biases and evidence and, you know, whatever, but like you clearly have this blind spot when it comes to your conservative politics. But he was still able to separate it. You know, like that's one of the things that I always envied, or not envied, but I really like about when, you know, because Dan answers a question and he gives the Dan McClellan leftist ideological answer, and that's the only one he offers. Whereas, like, you know, I mean, Bob Price has done 3-hour podcasts on what does the Bible say about homosexuality, and it really is amazing because he walks through all of the references, and then he says like, well, this is what the Greeks thought, and this is what Eusebius thought, and this is what the Desert Fathers thought, and this is what they said at Nicaea, and this is what the Catholics said, and this is what Luther said, and this is what the Dutch radicals said, and this is what the German critical theorists said, you know, and on, and there's like, and then he gets to the very end, he's like, and this is what I think, and he steelmans everybody, and he really just lays out all of the thought, and that's that. And that's why I directly compared Dan to.
But Dan's doing, and he
claims.
Dan claims he's doing a version of that because he started out that podcast. 2 of the most recent podcasts I heard saying that he catches it from both sides, so he knows he's over the center or something like that. You go, no, you're not catching it from both sides. No. You're catching it. There's blue church Mormons and there's blue church non-Mormons. You know, you don't catch hell from either one of those. You catch hell from non-blue church Mormons and non-blue church, you know, the other side. Yeah. You don't catch any hell from blue church. No hell from blue church.
People are gonna like watch you guys and you're like, who's this Dan McCullen guy? I gotta go check him out. He's probably one of the worst. And they'll watch some of his videos and be like, this isn't that bad. He's just, but that's, I think, like, you can't make these generalizations about Dan and then expect to go look at his stuff, and that's what you're going to see is just blatantly this. It's a lot of his videos are just, you know, an explanation of what researchers who try to make the best informed, historically neutral position will have, and he'll explain. He'll do exactly what he said he tries to do. It's only in those moments where usually he's doing the Foucauldian thing of trying to counteract some person who's used the Bible to make some point about what is socially or morally right. And then he'll do the deconstruction of it, the Foucauldian thing, the historical analysis of it, and say, well, since these things have been arbitrary throughout history and espoused by points of power, then, and the interpretation that you're using right now isn't necessarily authoritative and didn't mean the exact same thing back then, therefore we can reconstruct and renegotiate it now. And then it's almost like, just to play that intentional game, he will do a renegotiation with the text on camera with you, making the point that he wants to make, because you can do that. And then he'll kind of explode their concept and lay down a new concept. And the new concept that he lays down, that's where you'll find where his particular political bias is. And it's only, it's peppered throughout his content. It's not in every video, but anytime there's an opportunity to do that, it'll happen.
Like, by way of analogy, it's like a Mormon archaeologist. And like not an archaeologist specialized in Mormonism, but an archaeologist who is a Mormon. Where, like, you know, they're not fucked up on the Greek and Egyptian and, you know, Chinese stuff. Like, they're perfectly fine on all that. Where they get fucked up is when shit encroaches on the Mormon faith. And that's what we're saying about Dan, is that, like, Dan isn't fucked up everywhere, but if the scholarship bumps up against his blue church ideology, the ideology wins every single time.
That's deconstructed. But the other thing is, kind of as Flip said, Robert Price will be able to say, this is what a more conservative guy might say. This is what this guy might say. Dan will only say there's a consensus between the people who have my same political leanings. But that's where I think he gets dishonest. And I think that's actually covered here a little bit in this video as it comes up right now.
Well, let's keep going.
With what the Academy had become, mandatory DEI statements and all. Yet somehow, until this year, I always held on to the fancy that somehow, had things gone differently, had the universities been managed well, or at least less politically, I would have been well suited to be a university professor. I guess it's good to put away childish fantasies by looking at the thing you once thought you wanted soberly and realizing what it actually is. And, oddly enough, I don't think I would have fully completed.
And so this is kind of one of the points. Here's Dan McClellan. And what I mean by that is there's another one everywhere. They're like trained through the academies, through the divinity schools, there's a million of them and they have the exact same ideas, and there's a version of it for the domain that you want. You can you have some domain. There's a Dan McClellan there. Maybe they've not gotten TikTok famous, but they're going to have the exact same techniques to deconstruct and kind of waffle on equivocate when one's acceptable and one's not based on their politics.
Well, like James Lindsay always talks about, the thing that like launched him down this whole rabbit trail he's been on for years now was that somebody linked him to a paper he saw somewhere, that there was a published scientific paper on feminist glaciology. That's and then he read the paper and he was like, wait, like this was published by a scholar, and that's what sent him down this thing where you're like, oh my god. And that thing's like, so not even glaciology is uncorrupted by this shit.
Yeah.
Completed this late realization without coming in contact with the online lefty personality and academic, Professor Matt McManus. Now, I should emphasize here, I don't think Professor McManus is out of the ordinary, nor are his progressive views particularly unusual. Having written a number of articles and at least one book about the new right, McManus was one of the lefties pushing back against the new anti-progressive political movements online since 2015. I had spoken to Matt early in 2021 about...
And this is something about him, is they'll generally talk about the people they criticize, never to the people who criticize.
His work on the right, provided some criticism, and then promptly forgot about him until he emerged in 2023, writing a response to Curtis Yarvin and the rest of the new right in the magazine Commonweal. I guess what immediately stood out to me about Matt was a certain similarity in our biographies. We are about the same age, the same level of educational achievement, and have the same disposition towards reading old books. Yet our lives have ended up pushing in diametrically opposed directions. But what is really interesting about Professor McManus, for the purpose of this essay, is how perfectly he exists as an archetypical specimen of the millennial left-wing academic, starting with his political views. And what are those political views? At the surface level, Dr. McManus, like many other aspiring academics, stands at the forefront of modern social justice progressivism, still desperately trying to retain some of the pieties of the old academic tradition. Still some kind of Christian, McManus describes himself as a socialist officially, yet when pressed in public conversation, defers to advocating for the Nordic model, which is probably why so many of his interlocutors mistakenly believe he is a social democrat. The core of Matt's more rigorous political material consists of the familiar deconstructive critiques of traditional teleological worldviews in favor of modern progressive politics. The general form of his case, retracing familiar progressive arguments, amounts to insinuating that deconstructive philosophical schools, emerging in the late 19th century, invalidate classical approaches to knowledge, leaving progressive orthodoxy as the only valid philosophical contender. This is a common view, on the left at least, and a perspective that I have seen used many times against more classical philosophical outlooks. It starts with rehashing a general skeptical form that calls everything into question, and then follows it up with some cute modern progressive arguments, usually from John Rawls, to make the default lefty answers seem reasonable. Really, at this stage, answering these standard view-from-nowhere deconstructive critiques should be routine for any reasonably aware post-progressive, but for the neophytes in the audience, perhaps a rehash would be useful. To start with the obvious, modern, scientifically inspired schools of critique derived from the work of Nietzsche, Freud, and Darwin are not narrowly tailored intellectual defeaters for classical ethical traditions. Instead, these perspectives are, in the words of Daniel Dennett, universal solvents. They are broad-based, extensive deconstructive attacks that reduce all human ethics to emergent properties and call into question all prescriptive moral sentiments. There's no get-out clause where the ethical perspectives that progressives like Matt enjoy using liberally in their own politics. Nietzsche's death of God does not come for the God of Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle, leaving the God of Paul Tillich and Martin Luther King alive and well. The critique is extensive. It applies to all moralism and all sacred sentimentality, traditional or progressive. Attempts by the left to save their cherished political project from the deconstruction they apply to their enemies comprise an embarrassing catalog of sloppy thinking and special pleading. Invariably, the arguments amount to linguistic...
And I think that's what the question Jonathan poked at him was poking at, is the start of like, where does your whole thing is to deconstruct the teleology of the stuff that must be gotten rid of because it's bad tradition, it's Slytherin, it's stuff that's we're past this now. But then you smuggle in your new teleology, your new moral.
We're past the idea that the Bible had anything negative to say about homosexuality. We've evolved past that interpretation. It's just so silly.
Well, there's something telling about the way he talked about himself in his story about why he started TikTok. And what he said was that there were no credentialed authorities talking about biblical scholarship. And he repeated it. He said,
nobody had the priesthood.
I wanted to be the credentialed authority. And so, I mean, once you've started looking into this and you realize how ideologically driven the world of academia is, and particularly in the humanities, what that really translates to that you don't really realize until you dig into this stuff is that somebody who has a specific critical theory perspective on the subject matter and will infuse all of his analysis of the data with that perspective, that's the credential that you're going to get. and that's the perspective you're going to get.
And part of what I've been banging my head against the wall about for years, I mean, I think you guys too, is that Daniel Dennett thing, that this is the acid without container. You guys don't get to just use it on your enemies. It holds for your theological views as well. I say theological, your telos, your beliefs of, any sort of, we should do this or should do that or should interpret the Bible this way, or God must be love. I mean, that's so often stated just as like, well, God's got to be love. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. And you're like, where do you pull that from? Like, I remember growing up, one of my favorite gods to read and study about, because this Abrahamic God stuff bored me. I like to learn about Zeus and Poseidon and all those guys. There was no idea that God is love in any of that. Where's this thing of like God is love, and that's just it's got to be that way, and that's smuggled in so often.
Hat tricks, where philosophers smuggle their own preferred specific teleological preferences in through the back door while denying the existence of the concept generally. Furthermore, the attempt to appeal to will to power or existentialism to reconstruct ethical certainty ends up being facile, since, just as the original critique deconstructs all forms of human value, an appeal to will brings them all back. Far from solidifying a progressive worldview, the approach...
That's kind of like that joke we were making about the dragons. It's like all your stuff is... We're just going to we're going to deconstruct. We're going to look at this with the science. We're going to be hardcore about all this sorts of stuff. And then just boom, we'll just have it all come just right back real quick with just one single moralistic claim that doesn't really have like a strong base in anything, let alone science.
There's something to that, though, just in terms of like the whole atheist thing where you guys have talked about before, where, the atheists say we deny all miracles, but then they get to the Big Bang or the beginning of the universe and they'll say, okay, we'll grant you one miracle. And then after that, so that it's okay, if you're going to grant one miracle, then we've said that miracles are possible. Like, how do you guys square that corner and make it make sense?
Me? I don't.
I wouldn't call the Big Bang.
I say we don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, that thing is like I keep saying, all atheism has one opinion on one question. Like, all I think is like, I don't believe in God, but I'm not positing anything in that place. I don't know.
But Porch time, viewers, mark your bingo card for Flip, and atheism has one answer about one question.
Not even one answer, one opinion. It's not even an answer; it's an opinion.
But most atheists, I was just reading like Isaac Asimov's bio today, and he landed on that thing too of like, well, I've got to posit something then too, and then so I've got to posit this humanism. That's all the way back in the 60s, and I'm sitting here blaming it on 2012 atheism plus. I mean, they still will add stuff into it, or like he says here, they'll smuggle it into their worldview, and then they'll act like it's science or act like it's neutral. And that's the stuff that I just go, like, I'm fine with you kind of like positing stuff.
It's just the data.
Acting. Yeah.
It's just the data.
Yeah.
And that's
data over dogma.
That's the point you were trying to make to RFM and Bill Real, that they kind of don't see. And everybody who's like so bathed and baked in it, they don't see is like, it's fine that they think that, but it's a moral assertion. It's not.
And also Dan McClellan is being perfectly Orwellian doublespeak, because like he means dogma over data. We know that. We know that we've seen him do that. Like, everybody who's ever been blocked for linking Thomas Sowell is another little testimony that he doesn't care about the data. Not when it pumps up against his time.
Charles and Jonathan are the same person there. I got the, but
wow.
Yeah, it's getting to that here, because that's what he goes into, and because I don't know if I'll get as far as I want to get to, because it's so long. But everybody should watch this because the whole video.
Yeah, this looks really good. I played the heck out of the Hogwarts Express or the Hogwarts Legacy game, and I was still a big Harry Potter fan, and everything that. I think listening to that Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling has made me just respect her so much more, and so and I of course have been affirmed as an official transphobe bigot yet again this week.
Yeah, well, that's that's what we want to get into next. As Charles is asking, have you guys listened to that? And and then we listened to Contrapoints come out this week. If anybody listened to that, which Contrapoints, of course, comes out having to, I don't know what, disavow the witch trials of J.K. Rowling and disavow the lady who did it and all that stuff with some hour and a half long screaming about that. But part of the point is, I guess it continues on this video. I might go a little bit more, but the next point is how they start justifying that they don't have to justify it or argue about it or debate it. They can then just dodge it by, if they get tested at all or get pushed back on it all, they can just go, well, you're a bigot. Well, you're a racist, or something like that. There's no needing to answer or talk to the person at all. And in the Contrapoints video, some of that stuff, I almost kind of thought that they'd gotten past those arguments, but they all just wheeled around again. Like, we cannot debate this or have arguments or have discussions with people on these subjects because it's our lives on the line. It's not theory and ideas. And Jared says, Amy Lee just told me to cut toxic people out of my life, and the amount of times I've heard you guys called the toxic lately is concerning. Sorry, it's over. Dang it. We lost Jared just because we had Jonathan on, who I've heard is a transphobe, and we're guilty by association now. That's so sad that they use that term as if like you're phobic of them. If anything, you are philic of them, that you are caring and worrying and looking out for, and it's
I don't know. I'm right now. I'm struggling with the issue of whether or not. So Bill Reel, after the tools conversation, I actually ended up staying on talking with them for a while afterwards, and the subject of trans issues came up because there were some people in the online chat raising the issue because they wanted to alert people that I was a transphobe. And so I spent some time telling him how I got into the issue, what my research led me to conclude, and my perspective on it. And, it's clear that even within the administrative team of their podcast, there were some mixed views. And it came out that, some of the people there had been involved because they also work with the Mormon Stories podcast, people had been involved in censoring me in that Facebook community. I'm no longer allowed to talk about that issue there.
You're officially not allowed to post about it.
Irony, you were taken into the. That's the thing, is like the Mormons at least have the decency to take you into the bishop's office and tell you what to do. They will tell you to your face you've been disfellowshipped, but these fuckers will do it behind your back.
That's why I say you're simultaneously more canceled and less canceled than us. We weren't anything else that we could just be squashed down by putting the mute button on us, Whereas they have to somewhat.
It's been at least 5 years.
It has to be revealed a little bit that now you're
verboten. Because you were a known quantity. They have to deal with you somehow, because people are going to say, well, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
Well, just like it's an acid that can erode everything, it can also erode your reputation. And so I think it's a very easy switch to flip in the minds of people, because there's this groupthink going on and reputational warfare is kind of part of the process. Then as soon as somebody says this person is a bigot or transphobe, then other people are like, oh, I didn't know. Should I take down the stuff? I think if you want to show that screenshot that is of the comments in the TikTok video, I think it's really instructive, because you can see in real time somebody who resonated with statements that I made in the context of the podcast. You could do that if you want to bring it up. I think it's because it's impressive to see it happen in real time.
Yeah, I want to see it. I never saw it.
I will pull it up.
He may have taken it down, because that's the whole question.
Well, it's here at least now for now.
But at some point we got to show the clip of Dan McClellan saying he has no political bias.
Oh, well, we've shown that before, but I also want to show Jonathan getting the question in.
I want to see that for sure, because I missed that one. I've switched from bourbon. This is something actually very interesting that is not really available and this is a 100% malted rye whiskey from Finland. And it is different, to say the least, because it's not like an American rye.
So I came across this guy in the wild on a TikTok, and of course, most of his first stuff is like, these Midnight Mormons, you gotta watch out for them. And part of what the continuing thing of that video that I don't know if will continue, what he points at is part of Dan McClellan and those guys freaking out at the Christian nationalism, these guys freaking out at Midnight Mormons, or Bill Rill and RFM freaking out at Jacob Hansen, as if those things are new. Like, no, those things are old. Your freaking out is what's new. Like, that's the new, you know. Those Midnight Mormons are just what Mormons are, and
I've always been.
Yeah.
Jacob Hansen is just what Mormons are and have been. What's new?
I gotta say,
go ahead.
I like this dude's look. He got like the dude kind of look. He's laid back, Exmo Jesus. I could totally dig it.
Right on.
Oh, I can't even with the Midnight Mormons.
The reality is, you did state that you do not feel a necessity, or you do not feel you need to drive those people whom we have taken out of the faith or shoved out of the faith to another sense of security.
That's true.
And I think that's morally wrong. I think that's
What shall
morally
they send them
bankrupt.
to? The Jehovah's Witnesses?
This idea
That's
that people
you know.
who leave Mormonism
What's that? I think he edited it to be like one.
need another
Yeah,
Mormon
that's the thing. Like,
because
that's not a known. Like, he's. I don't know.
never sat right with me.
And I mean, RFM, when he was on with Jonathan, he said it kind of the same. It's like, I need to send them to another high demand religion. And not that you need to go to another high demand religion. Sometimes I think maybe what you didn't get is just enough critical thinking, like not critical theory, critical thinking, to then worry about the next thing instead of just getting out of that one. And that's why I like the tools and the steel tools and the wood tools. Or
Yeah.
I remember you had a couple episodes about critical thinking on your podcast too.
But that's something though. Like, I mean, it's a common story, and I've seen it a lot where people are like, "Well, I left my religion, but I need something else." And that's just one of those things where, like, not like in the same way that I never had an angry phase with the Mormon Church, I never had a "well, what now" phase. Like, for me, it was just very much like, "Well, the church isn't true," you know. But like, I'd pretty well.
I sort of did in the sense of I went to academia. Like, academia is going to guide me through this one guiding light. And just like those Buddhists on RFN or on Bill Rill's podcast this week, they found out that other Buddhists actually sexually harass too. And you have this thing dawning on you that humans are humans or something like that. And they're always pulling crap everywhere you go. But I had my second dawning on me that things aren't as pristine as they're presented to be from academia. And now from that point, hopefully I'm a little bit more skeptical of everything I come across presenting itself as a guru, but maybe it could catch me again. But I don't think even if I got caught in something again, there's not going to be a moment like, oh my gosh, I was fully duped by this thing. But me believing that humanities professors and academics were actually hardcore truth seekers and finding out they just absolutely were not was 100% the same shock to me as it was to those Buddhists that other Buddhists are harassers.
Well, I mean, because that idea, like, it took longer and was harder for me to shake my faith in the humanities as at its core being about truth seeking. It was even like years after knowing you and having you like tell me all this stuff for the first time, and also again like having met so many of them, like I was still like, no, there has to be it in there somewhere. Then I realized like no, the institution has squashed it all out.
Yeah,
the ideology, it's totally ideologically captured.
When I was first telling you about it, I mean, it was for sure, I think, kind of secluded to the humanities. I mean, it was just starting up. That's where it busted in. And I accidentally ended up in the place where it busted in. And it busted in earlier, in the Ivies and all that stuff. But it's the first place that busted in Utah, the University of Utah.
So I just watched the Sopranos episodes where one of the subplots is the Native Americans protesting Columbus Day. And the Italian monsters idolize Columbus, and there's all that social justice language. And this is 2001, I think 2001, 2002 that the show was being made, and it's because it's one of those things that pisses me off about the gaslighting of the left, where they're like, "What do you mean? Like these ideas are been around forever?" I'm like, well, Here's exhibit 10,051, Sopranos 2001, quoting fucking social justice shit. The daughter's in college and saying the things that we're talking about today. It's all right there, And then the part where there's a white guy who invents a native background and becomes the CEO and chief of the fucking tribe, and he's just another fucking gangster. Ultimately,
I told you, I was at the Atlanta Braves game. I told you this last year. I was at the Atlanta Braves game, and before the game, they had some sort of tribute to all these Native Americans or something like that. And they brought out like all these tribe leaders, and they showed them up. I think I took pictures and tried to show them you guys, but I'm like, every one of these persons is like was white as I am out there.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here? And they're all getting these like, endowments and donations.
Yeah, it really is. It's so it's so embarrassing. I don't know how they don't.
And honestly, Kwaku's argument is paternal as fuck because it presumes an external source is needed for me to develop an inner sense of security. I bring this whole debate up because Jonathan Streeter made what I thought was one of the best rebuttals to Kwaku's original argument in a recent episode of Mormonism Live.
Was that if what I'm saying is freeing people from the high demand fundamentalist religion of Mormonism, then it's somehow incumbent upon me to set up a separate high demand fundamentalist religion for those people that I have liberated to become enslaved to all over again.
That hard cut too cuts out the point of where you said, well, there's something to think about there.
Yeah,
but,
that's what I was getting at earlier. Is like it seems to be a human thing. Like it's a phenomenon. So we can't just say, fuck that. Like, no, there's something going on there.
The escape of your loved one from the deception of a false faith is not dependent on another faith being true. The lies, the cover-ups, conflicting doctrine, deceptive practices, and harmful effects of a false high-demand religion are the things which show that it's false, and your loved one can come to that knowledge without having to immediately adopt another faith. And another faith isn't required for them to see the falseness of it. You don't have to know the truth in order to reject a lie. And the example here is Thomas Edison. He's trying to discover just the right filament as he's inventing the light bulb. The filament has to last a really long time, but not melt under its own heat. He tested thousands of different filaments. He knew that one that melted under its own heat or wouldn't last was the wrong filament. Even if he didn't know what the right one was, he was able to reject the wrong ones. You don't necessarily have to already know the truth to be able to call out a lie and not shape your life by it. And this is one of the things that, akin to that moment in the debate where we're frequently told by family members, well, what do you believe in now? And the what do you believe in now question is kind of like an invitation to say, well, tell me what you believe in so I can show you how it's false or it's not perfect.
Exactly. With the idea that if I can show you what your belief is now is false, then somehow my belief is made truer.
And so they hate it when we're like, well, I'm not really here espousing anything true about what I believe. And part of that comes the humility of having shaped your life and identity around something that you discover to be false is you have a really hard time being as committed to some other organization in the future. So it's not so much that, I'm not trying to tell other people to live by like me. I just want people to understand that the idea that you can discern falsehood, deception, manipulation is important because none of us want to shape our lives and our identities around things that are false.
I really like this idea because it gives us permission to identify ideas and organizations that don't work for us and throw those out without knowing what comes next. In fact, the journey to find ideas and causes that resonate with us and help us become better people, that's what life is about. You get to be your own moral, philosophical, and spiritual leader. You get to decide what's right for you and what's wrong. If that's another church or group, great. If not, that's cool too. But what we don't need to do is fall into this old bastard's mind game and feel like we have to answer the question, where will you go? Because here's the secret. It's wherever the hell you want to
go.
That's just like your opinion, man.
I'm sure too that like he would say it's a problem if what I chose was some theonomy Christian religion. I went and joined up with Doug Wilson up in Idaho or something like that. Like, well, no, not that one. Like that one's not okay. But let's see here. Where's the? And you went looking through the
That's
when you look in the comments under that, then it's happening more frequently now. Anytime I show up in something that will have a mixed audience, like your audience, like the only people that know about you are already problematic, so I don't have to worry about it with your audience. But
so far,
I used to troll in conservative creationism groups, because whenever they drop just one of those dumb, like, William Lane Craigian cosmological argument type things, I'd always just comment, "Alhamdulillah, I'm Muslim now." Because like, okay, what do you want me to take away from this? Like, you want me to be a Christian because of this thing, but like, no, all you've done is said like, well, something, it's got to be something. I'm like, okay, well, why not Islam? Is that one? Like, it makes as much sense as anything else.
All right. I don't know if you know the person or if they've commented before, but Streeter is a transphobe.
The name sounds familiar.
They say they've tried to call you out on it.
So, like,
really, do you have any references to things he said? Which is always kind of blows my mind, like why Bill Reel and RFM and all these guys kind of get blown away. Like, are you not watching his channel? Watch his channel more, you narcissistic guys. You guys aren't listening to other people at all. You're just once people become creators, they stop listening to others at all.
But there's a good reason for that in some extent. Like, you want to be original and you don't want to be copying what other people are doing. And so, like, when I was in major creation mode where I was trying to put a lot of stuff out, I tried not to watch too many other things because I wanted to have original takes on things that I could say were authentically mine. So I can understand that to some extent, especially because they're doing a lot of regular stuff.
But as far as John being a transphobe, like, I mean, how many queer teens do you want to have kill themselves? Like, what's your target?
It's not. That's not what phobe means. Phobe means if he sees a queer teen, he hides under the bed.
Well, it's because he's causing harm one way or the other.
Yeah, so. One way or the other. I guess that's phobe. I guess a phobe.
And you only do that because
it's just,
want to.
Like when you talk about these groupthink and these social things and all the things that people write as, cult dynamics or whatever. One thing is you have to have a term for the other. It's not the subaltern, because that's the victim that we have compassion for. It's the evil other. So the evil other is the Satan figure or those in his thrall, and just in the social justice ideology, it's the phobe or the bigot.
Well, but things but why are they bad? Well, because they cause harm. Well, how?
Well, I think that comes out here because. So we have, this person pops up, says Streeter's a phobe. And then the person who is a creator, I don't know if this is the actual creator of this particular post. I'm not sure.
He's the creator
on TikTok, it has to be, right?
Okay.
Or I guess somebody else could have copied it.
Yeah. No, okay. So really, do you have any references to things he said? I haven't heard anything, and I'd love to avoid causing harm. Ding, 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 ding. Private message me if you could. Now, I'm not sure why you have to private message if they couldn't just put here, but then she says, just ask him. He'll tell you.
I just did ask, and obviously
I evaded the question.
Oh, that makes sense. No, but like, you can just say 0. You can say that your goal is that 0 queer kids kill themselves. That's
well, yeah, but even you'd have to have a discussion about what's queer kid mean. What do you mean by that? Like, queerness, if you look into it, is a philosophy. It's not a category of organic beings. So you just have to say how many kids are informed and educated enough about the different philosophies and how they intersect with reality and objective reality. And like, kids can't do that. So to say that there's a queer kid is a loaded statement. It's already jumping the gun. And so there's a whole lot to talk about. It's the same thing with trans kids. Like, you can say kids who experience dysphoria because that is a description.
But like, to avoid the bullshit kind of question that I asked, though, is like, just say none.
None.
0.
Yeah.
Like I mean, like, how many children that are being raised by ISIS do I want to commit to do suicide bombing? None. My goal is none. It's like, well, there's a big question to be had about, well, how much choice do they have? They were brought up, all this stuff. Like, is it a real thing? But like, no, you can just say none, because like, especially when they're playing this game of like, oh, this causes harm and you're okay with it. It's like, no, you can say like, no, I'm not okay with it. I'm going to start there. Oh, by the way, there's a whole question to be asked about, is this even a real category? Because, I mean, these guys love it. Like the, this thing that you just brought up is like, there are no queer kids in the same way that Richard Dawkins said, like, there are no Muslim children. There are no Catholic children. You know, like if you talk about queer kids, you're talking about the same thing as a Catholic child. You're talking about somebody that's been groomed into this.
So that looks like Justin is the.
Okay, so that's how TikTok does it. There's a name for the channel and then a name for the creator.
Yeah. So then he's saying.
Now this is brilliant because this is showing you how somebody first encounters the social rules about who you can talk to, who you can platform. Yeah. And so it says, just ask him. He'll tell you. I've called him on it multiple times. Okay, thanks for the heads up. So now there's this red flag here. Streeter's a problematic person. We don't know why or how yet, but we're going to look into it. So then somebody else says, he may be, but that doesn't make a person all bad or have zero to say. What's your thing? So we can decide to wholly cancel you for it. See, so they're pushing back against this idea.
Cancel you for it, not even Streeter.
Yeah. So
there's no nuance.
Transphobes equals bad. There's no nuance when it comes.
Which is basically the same stuff that Contrapoints was saying. Like we don't even deal with this.
And this loads into their statement the idea that when you call someone a transphobe, it automatically means that they are trying to use nuance in order to invalidate somebody's existence and threaten their lives. And so now I see Justin Exmo Jesus as really, he wants to be good. He wants to follow the social rules, but he's not yet familiar with the social rules. And, you know, I remember being at that point where after you come out of the church, you're not sure what is right, what is wrong. You're trying to learn these ways of defining what is right and what is wrong. And social justice comes with a set of rules, but it's a little bit amorphous. And so you learn them by experience, by seeing who gets to be, you know, who gets disciplined, who doesn't, what things are allowed to say. And you start to build a knowledge about that until you get canceled and you realize that you have to reject all of it altogether.
You get trained like a dog, rewarding punishment. Good.
And that's what's happening here. So he says, I'm trying to be an ally for the trans community. So he's signaling that he wants to be a good person. While I like Streeter's point here, I don't want to cause harm. And there he's referring to the moral principle that is used to draw the boundaries of the social interactions. And then the second moral principle is, should I remove this video? He understands that when there's somebody who's problematic, you don't platform them and you don't want their stink to get onto you because you might cause harm, which means you shouldn't advance their voice or promote their name or anything like that. And so but he's also deferring his responsibility to somebody else. He's waiting for somebody to tell him, yes, you should remove this video. And if it's somebody who themselves are a marginalized category, then that carries even more weight than somebody else who's like that. But that's kind of all the stuff going in on this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so Lunatic Hex says, my comment was more to the person than to the video itself. I think we can have discussions about the video, but also not mince words. So we'll let the video stay. But we'll let the video stay. We can talk about the subject that he had, but when it comes to who this Streeter guy is and whether he's a phobe, we're not going to mince words. He's a phobe. And heart just because they say something we agree with. We're not going to mince words just because they say something we agree with. I think that's a continuation of the comment. And then Justin, the Exmo Jesus, I want to be a better ally. I'd love some guidance on how to best handle this one. And this is where...
Teach me, Rabbi.
And then should I remove? And somebody sent him a private message. So this is where, you know, I want to be a better ally. And this is where, when you start out in this world of social justice, ally sounds like a good thing. You know, you're on the side of the good people. You're defending the downtrodden. You're defending the marginalized. You are the savior, but not a white savior. You're just a good person savior. You're an ally. And then as you get into it more, you'll start to realize that your job as an ally is to do exactly what is demanded of you and to have no voice of your own, no opinion of your own if it contradicts what it should be. And you realize that allyship is kind of a leash, and it becomes a world that is even more inscribed and suffocating than the world of Mormonism ever was. But what do you do when you realize that's what you are? So we go down, and then the original commenter says, not when it comes to people's rights to exist. There is no nuance. And that's where the loaded aspect of that phrase is that
that is a thought-stopping cliche.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there is no nuance when it's right to exist. So that must mean I don't have to think anymore. He's a transphobe. He denies people's right to exist. There's no nuance, no reason to talk about it. I don't even have to know what he said.
So,
it depends on
since
your
I've
own
got you
boundaries.
here right now, do you deny anyone's right to exist, John?
No. And if you look at all of the videos that I have, when people say I'm transphobic, I've focused very clearly in the stuff that I put on my channel on the issue of surgical and medical and social transition of children who experience gender dysphoria. Yeah. And looking at it from an evidence-based perspective, looking at the very studies that have been used to establish the protocols that are referenced as the guiding star for the therapeutic clinics that exist here in the United States and in Europe. Now, when I say referenced as the guiding star, I mean that they say, oh, the Dutch studies did it this way, so we're going to do it this way. But the problem is when you see it, how they're actually doing it, they are not paying attention to the Dutch studies, except for to be able to say they did it so we can do it. But they're not using the same screening criteria. They're not using the same recommendations. They're not doing any of the follow-up. They're not tracking any of the data. And they're doing it with assumptions about the patient population that they're carrying that are totally different from what the Dutch protocol ethically unsound, scientifically unsound. But that equals transphobia in the minds of people who don't want to listen to nuance.
Well, to quote, I don't remember who exactly, but some truths aren't useful.
Well, Flip and I are for sure, generally the concept is like those liberal guys, like we are not transphobes, like adult trans people, like, we are cool and down with and whatever, as long as they're not pushing ideology, just like nobody else is like pushing ideology on certain people. But Jonathan has, in some of those posts on Mormon Stories, I've come in and I'll come in sometimes those things because over the years I've gotten so frustrated, I'll just come in hot. and Jonathan will tell me like, "Bro, come on, back off. I'm not trying to lob grenades here." And I'll go, "Oh, okay, I better back off of this one." And the thing, and that's because Jonathan's worried. He wants to have like a good, rational, supposedly what we're supposed to have conversation about this stuff. But that's point of the Contrapoint stuff is her whole entire screed, which is as old as we know all this stuff, as we've been trying to tell people, is that no, stuff's not up to be talked about. We're not in liberal world. We're in post-liberal world.
Well, no, I've used the analogy a bunch of times, but I think it fits perfectly, is that the queer trans claim of the cause harm works exactly like Muslims justifying murdering Christian nuns in Cairo because a Dutch cartoonist draws Muhammad. They make the exact same claims like, hey, you are challenging our right to exist. You are hurting us on the deepest possible level. Where it's like, no, we just don't believe in your religion. That's all. We believe in liberalism. But no, you're causing harm. You're denying us. It's the exact same thing. It's like, it's so stupid. It's like the same people are like, it's like, if I don't believe you can be born in the wrong body because you are your body, I'm a transphobe and I'm causing harm and I'm denying people the right to exist. But I don't believe anyone's a child of God either. And I'm thinking most of these people don't, because that's a Mormon article of faith, Well,
so
it's non-aggression principle. I believe they can all hold that as long as they aren't aggressing onto another.
And I don't dislike Mormons, come on, it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. To me, it's like completely separate things. Most of my family is still Mormon. I love them all the same. What am I mad? Am I pissed off? Do I hate them because I don't accept their supernatural claims? No. The same thing with Muslims. I don't have a problem with your supernatural claims. I just don't.
You want this one, Jonathan?
I don't believe them.
No, get this one off the screen. Don't cover it up. No.
Lost me at Streeter. We'll forgive the head fake Larry Crafted pretending. They're so torn. It's
this one hurt.
It's like, oh, I still love the music, but I just can't deal with the behavior.
Spencer is a phenomenal guy, and I feel bad that he feels this way about me. I can understand why he does and that he does, but he's a great guy. So if you ever see anything that he's involved in, definitely check it out.
Yeah.
So, but part of that whole thing, because all this stuff ties together, and I'll poke to him, and I wish we had 10 hours to listen to every single line every one of them gave, but of course we don't. But this, first there's the Contrapoints video. This one here, the witch trials of J.K. Rowling, which I don't know that we need to hit any points, but of course she points to, Jonathan called it from the start before I even watched it. It says, oh, she's starting talking about Anita Bryant, and before long she's going to say J.K. Rowling is as bad as Anita Bryant, and of course she did. I can probably pull up the moment. Yeah, I think it's right when she said
the thing that underlies that her entire perspective on this article is she relies completely on the idea that the argument and the situation regarding trans kids is exactly the same as homosexual people, in that it is innate, eternal, and immutable, and that transness is all of those things. And so any attempt to say, hold on, let's wait a little bit, let's look at other issues that may be at hand, all of those attempts are manifestations of conservative bigotry, just as they were in the issue of homosexuality. And if that was the case, then I think it's a lot easier to follow her arguments and to follow her/him, Shim's arguments and do that. The issue is that it's not the same. And that's why the medical research has shown that you can't treat it the same. And the existence of detransitioners that have experiences that are completely different from the quote-unquote ex-gay movement and point to elements of social contagion, like all of that has to be taken into consideration when we're talking about irreversible changes surgically, medically, and so forth in kids.
Yeah.
This has been her main issue for several.
Too fast. This one doesn't need to be that fast.
This has been her main issue for several years now. And because she's so famous, she's become the de facto global champion of backlash to trans rights. Truly, the Anita Bryant of transphobia, except worse, because she's way more famous and way more liked than Anita Bryant ever was. Rowling has also praised self-described theocratic fascist Matt Walsh for his transphobic propaganda film. She refers to trans women as trans-identified males, known.
Theocratic fascist? What's that?
What, did something else come in? Where?
What? No, she says Matt Walsh, self-described theocratic fascist. I want to know the context of that.
Yeah,
is he saying that he believes that God is sovereign?
He's a Catholic, and like so many of those trad Catholics, they'll say stuff like, "Oh, I think that the nation should turn back to God" and stuff like that, but nothing like overly philosophically all the way there. Just kind of typical tradcon, trad Cath. That's what they call trad Caths on the internet nowadays. If you look up trad Caths, although trad Caths, a lot of the trad Caths nowadays are particularly postmodern trad Caths. A lot of them are not really believers, but they kind of go, well, I'm going to go with this trad Cath thing because it's funny.
That's a major thread in The Sopranos. Is like, yeah,
why would you go trad Cath when there's trad Lutheran? I feel like the Lutherans have more fun.
Because the trad Cath is harkens to more of being in line with monarchy, and they like the idea of monarchy and like a one single strong.
Catholics drink a lot more than Lutherans.
That's what the witch trials of J.K. Rowling is about. The Rowling debate is a proxy for a larger question. Is transphobia a legitimate viewpoint worthy of polite consideration and respect in liberal, humane society? Or is it just an ugly prejudice that we can justifiably react to with scorn and condemnation?
Wonder what
she started out loading the question with the term transphobia. We're going to already
yeah, if he's cut out, and I'm sure he's saying what I'm saying here, but yeah, if it's actual transphobia, of course you can't start with that. Are you there, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you just cut out for a second. What were you saying?
Okay, no, I was just saying she's loaded the question with already labeling any dissenting opinion transphobia, removing the nuance. That's the thought-stopping, grenade lobbed at the beginning of the question, so we don't even have to worry about the rest of it.
Yeah. And then, of course, that comes up like multiple times on debate. She's got this whole section on debate right here. Chapter 5.
Debate.
And
Sar, I know I did this look before, and it's like not related to the video topic at all.
Oh, this is so typical of her shims.
No narcissism in this
I didn't
video.
really know who Contrapoints was.
When you know now, or wait, when didn't you know?
Now.
You didn't?
Up until about now. It's a name that kind of came up here and there, but I never really put it together.
Oh, really? Contrapoints is almost number one bread tube. You just see it a little bit less because it's like a video once every 6 months nowadays. But for a while, it was peak bread tube, and almost everybody on bread tube tried to copy in some sort of way Contrapoints. Like this is king of socialist left wing on YouTube.
What's another example of men making the best women yet again?
Well, their channel did not start with her as a woman, and there was, I believe, a point where some philosophy professors made a counter argument video pointing out errors in their video, and it was around the time that the trans identity came out, and so some people have accused this character of using that trans identity as a way to shield themselves from that particular criticism, but they're probably just bigots.
Yeah, and there was another person who was a super fan. I forget his name, but that person also started coming on as a mega fan, started dating when there was a girl, and then slowly themselves started transitioning, and slowly themselves started copying all the entire videos. Who is that? That's recently just put out a video complaining that the NHS is completely transphobic and stuff.
It's not Philosophy Tube, or is it, or something?
Philosophy Tube is one of them that did the same and also went trans all the way. But
even Chris Chan,
I get them all mixed up. But they all started they copy the aesthetics of it, and then a lot of them started out as philosophy bros, and slowly turned into philosophy shims as the aesthetics called for it and got more views for them. And it's all
it's almost like the way that they present their arguments is sophistry. It's full of emotional rhetoric that labels people and things and arguments as bad, just in the language that they use to describe arguments, like, poisoning the well and all these other different things that people will do to try to depict other people's arguments in a bad way. And there's so much smugness in the way that they present their points. I don't know. That's the thing. When you listen to the witch trials, there's an episode, they spend the first few episodes really focusing on J.K. Rowling and the controversy, and then they say, okay, well, we do need to listen to the other side. So they have an episode that's devoted entirely to a couple of critical voices of J.K. Rowling. And the young person in particular that they spend some time talking with, and then Contrapoints. And both of them kind of feel like, oh, we really, really love J.K. Rowling. We love the world that she created, and we just hope, our dream is that she'll see this, she'll hear this, and then she'll say, oh, I was mistaken, I was wrong, let me issue some apologies and get on the right side of history. And they lament that she's not engaging with people to really listen to. They feel like her problem is she hasn't actually listened to the other side. Mm-hmm. And you just get the sense when you listen to this, this apology and everything, that people would reasonably say, hey, if they're on their side of things, would say, why did you participate in this? It makes the trans issue look really bad, and it really does put up a pretty reasonable perspective on why we shouldn't hate J.K. Rowling. And so this video becomes necessary because she has to say, well,
Can we lose him?
Yeah, it keeps phasing out.
Oh, yeah. This video says it says I'm not for that video. Like she stakes in the sand. I think you're back, Jonathan. The very last sentence we lost.
No, okay. It's just, she had to make this video to disavow this, to say I'm not affiliated with the documentary. I shouldn't have, because I had no control on how they framed it. And so anyway, I should probably reboot my internet because I'm losing a lot of stuff.
Part of it is that, and this is what I've always been trying to tell people about these post-liberal or illiberal cynical theories, is not just that they don't debate or don't argue or don't like evidence-based reality type stuff. It's that they've gone beyond that and theorized, like they put in their theories and in their arguments, as you can listen to Contrapoints here, reasons why they can't and shouldn't.
Yeah.
Marty's coming on. Hey, Marty.
Whoa.
Marty, you watched this video and you said you kind of liked it, right?
No, I usually like Contrapoints videos. I did not like this one.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry to.
It just felt. I feel like Contrapoint. I feel like those videos usually do a pretty good job steel manning, and then also say, "Oh, this is why it's still wrong."
Yeah. Have you talked to Jonathan before, Marty?
I think
you guys have.
I don't think we've ever met. Like I've chatted you a bit.
Oh, I've watched so many videos with Anu. I feel like I already know you.
Yeah.
This kind of skepticism is in some ways a good impulse, but valuing dispassionate intellectualism above all else.
And this is the thing that we argue for. Like I'm diametrically opposed to this. Like from the hate thing from the start is say the universities should be dispassionately involved in truth seeking and not in this activism at the expense of truth seeking.
Can cause problems, especially where topics of social justice are concerned, because it can lead you to this kind of toxic centrism that asks, why are marginalized people so unwilling to have calm, philosophical debates about whether they should have rights? Are they afraid of dangerous ideas? Atheist philosopher Sam Harris, in his podcast about Megan's podcast, can we talk about how there are too many podcasts? I'm calling for a complete and total shutdown of podcasts until we can figure out what's going on. Sam Harris, in his podcast about Megan's podcast, complained that trans activism and activism in general is plagued by mental illness and hysteria.
I frankly think there's a fair degree of mental instability and even frank mental illness in the activist community. I mean, in all activist communities, the level of viciousness and hysteria is, it's hard to know what to compare it to.
Diversity when man accuses trans women of being hysterical. Is it really hysteria to react with strong emotions when your basic inclusion in society is up for debate?
So, I mean, all that's so loaded.
Wait, whoa. No, we're watching you on your 1.6.
We only talk science on this channel.
You're not marginalized. Like, you're among the least marginalized people in the history of the earth. You have 1.6 million subscribers on YouTube.
Well, Sam Harris was pretty clear. He said activists. He didn't say trans people. He said activists.
I mean, that's right. So is Contrapoints an activist?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's almost like there's a religious paradigm. Contrapoints is like the pastor that you go to and you get the sermon and the sermon invigorates you and it gives you the vigor as an activist to then go out and do the marching orders.
One thing that, there's a thing that differentiates the trans people of most of our lives and the trans people of the modern trans activist thing is that, because, I don't know how long, it was almost 20 years ago when I worked with somebody that transitioned and went through the whole thing. And the whole thing then was, I just want to be the other thing, and I don't want to draw any more attention to that than is necessary. It's like, okay, and now it's like, no, we're centering our entire existence. Like, I'm putting it in my job title that I'm trans, and it's a completely different thing.
Yeah, and back to this video, one of the points that he makes and talks about is he realized that you cannot be a truth seeker in current humanities. Like, there's certain levels of ideas or things or concepts that at some point you must be an activist for a thing, or you can't go down that road or talk about those ideas. And he kind of points to the idea of Slytherin, of saying, like, if you were Slytherin, you could no longer go back and look at the ideas of all things declared Slytherin in future Harry Potter. If we're past the end of Harry Potter, any sort of a fomenting of that worldview is going to be looked at as, oh my gosh, you're going to bring back the Death Eaters or something like that. But
no, I want to Go ahead. Well, I want to repeat what one of our commenters said, which was that Snape saved Slytherin. Empty Bedlam made that point, and that's I think if J.K. Rowling was to continue the story in the redemption mode that authors frequently take, that I think she would be keen to, it would be understanding that the story of every house is going to have heroes and villains, and you know, it's just that Slytherin is associated with some of those factors that tend to produce villains, but that's because it's like the Jordan Peters thing of wanting to be dangerous. Well, if you're dangerous, there's a very razor thin edge between whether you're a hero or a villain.
I just think it'd be fun to do like all the different versions, like, you know, Hufflepuff have a black market drug trade.
That's exactly what he said here, but he's also talking about like who becomes the next other as you know, Slytherin now in that post book age. What are they there for? Just to lose Quidditch matches forever and be the bad guys for that? Like, could they ever be the heroes again or something like that? But then the other idea is, then do they start going down the line and getting mad at the Hufflepuffs? The Hufflepuffs who guard the bathroom because that's just for witches or something like that, and each one of them becomes something like. And sooner or later, every single part of, just like's happened here, the Western tradition is now part of Slytherin. And then he also points out that these academics know like the game they're playing, and they know that they're kind of like hedging and doing the stuff. They're like, yeah, we can't ever act like we can really debate you or talk to you or entertain your position. No, we'll kind of act like we're going to do it and then never get around to it. Then we'll dodge it and we'll get out of it because we'll just call you a bigot, as if the other side could just say something to you like, well, you are a heretic, so I can't talk to you like that. Like, you can't. Go ahead.
Contrapoints did a brilliant job just in that example. It's all great to have, you know, detached debates, dispassionate debates, but not when social justice and real harm is on the line. And so you could just do that for any villainous character. You know, we'd love to have a debate for you and to platform your side and maybe do a counter, but not when social justice and harm is on the line. So we can't even listen to you or platform you.
Yeah, exactly. So they can get out of it.
But is there a line? Because I was thinking about that. I was like, would it be reasonable to argue with someone? There was something. Shoot, I don't know.
There's
where
a
to go
Death Eater
this
line. That's like the point is like Slytherin or Death Eater, you know, and
yeah, like do you argue with someone that claims that you prove to me you're not an asshole? And it's like, well, I don't think I am, you know, like do you really have to defend yourself against someone that you think is being a jerk, right? Like, and so that's where they're coming from.
Oh yeah, there's that. But in this scenario, he's talking about people who are academics or of this level of academic who are trying to have debates or the types of deal like we say that we would like. It's almost like you can't interact with Dan McClellan on his beliefs, like those beliefs that we're saying. There's like a cutoff there, and these people will talk about this other world, but they won't talk to this other world. And then one of the things he's pointing at is that those guys know what the difference is between a Death Eater and Slytherin, but the millions of kids watching them and starting to go, oh boy, this person's so smart, they don't get it. Does that make sense? Like they're passing something on that just becomes like a dogma to this crowd of TikTok sycophants who follow them. And that's one of my big issues.
I'm going to reboot my internet so I don't cut out as much. So I'll be back in just a second.
Reboot the dog.
He's here.
And that's kind of the point that he makes in this like larger extended version of like, well, what's post Harry Potter books, and then this dogmatic world of consensus view from the academia stuff, and who can we talk to, and we'll act like we're gonna interact with you or take on ideas or take down your ideas of science, but as soon as you find an actual person who could take you on a little bit, bigot. You'll just go straight to bigot or straight to mixing, calling the Slytherin and the Death Eater the same person, and dodge out of having to.
It's like, I mean, we have this exact thing right now in the rhetoric with Republican and Nazi. Like, there's a whole segment of the left that literally says there's no difference. You know, I mean, Just the other night, I was getting ready backstage, rehearsing for the thing, and I was playing a little orchestra for the community art thing. And there's, a bunch of like recently graduated or in school, and these were music students, and they were totally drenched in this Marxist bullshit. And it's just funny because they're talking about how like they wanted to leave Utah, and they said that like the music scene in Utah is too capitalistic, and there's no money in it. And it's just kind of funny how they said all this, and like like I got just a little bit into it with them. But it was amazing. Where it's like, you guys went to music school and like, but that was the thing that they talked about because I kind of made the point like, no, fascism is the marriage of state and corporations, and they said that's exactly what's happening. I'm like, no, the capitalists are anti-statist, and I didn't say this part, but it's like right now, all the big tech corporations are in line with which party and which state. Like, come on, think about this. But no, they were totally. Oh, but that's the hilarious thing is they accused me of being propagandized because I said, capitalism generates wealth, and they said I was propagandized for saying that.
Troy Levitt says, in the lore, Merlin was also Slytherin, but known for his outreach to Muggles. King Arthur and disdain for pure blood supremacism. J.K. baked in a sort of template for redemption there. Yeah, and there was redemption of and thanks for the resident super expertise, Troy.
Oh yeah.
And but there was redemption for Malfoy and those guys as well. I mean, it got to a point at the end of it where they were redeemed as somewhat victims themselves of the
very Darth
ideology and that
Vader
sort of stuff. But kind of one of the points that guy makes is like, you could imagine in the world of Harry Potter or something like that there's stuff that the Slytherin world has to add to the table, like the concept of like, what if, who knows if it's hereditary, right? So what if there is something to saying like over time you could do some sort of, say like there's like a wizarding IQ test and there's some sort of IQ realism thing of wizarding of like, there really is slightly more wizarding magic to kids born of double wizards or something like that on average. You know what I mean? It's the same, like the joke is like the whole entire joke is, what if there's a truth that goes against whatever thing and they're not allowed to say it or talk about it or whatever, or even bring it up, or they get canceled as a Death Eater or something like that. But the whole joke is like, how really does that world continue to deal with Slytherin, especially when in this current world they're trying to quickly turn Christian nationalist, a thing that's been around us all along, just like Slytherin's been around us all along or something like that, quickly turn it into they are all Death Eaters. And I just heard
a lot of themselves aren't helping themselves because like they're kind of inflating the term with that whoever it was that's like, well, I'm a Christian and a nationalist. Like, well, God damn it, now you've muddied the waters. But
for sure. So going back to satire, that this whole episode is them going over if satire or mockery is bad or that sort of thing, and reviewing their own stuff to see if they were mean or not. Yeah,
it was.
And there was a
poll.
There's
one where she brags about when she was Mormon and she blocked people. It's like...
There was a poll on Thoughtful Saints about, is mockery ever okay? And not to throw it to bus, but Anthony Miller says, I think it's Antichrist to ever mock or make fun of. But then I said, well, what do you have to say for this entire video where the entire thing is looking at their own mockery of Mormons, which I think mockery is fine. Like going back to Jonathan, that guy who was upset at Jonathan's apology, which was obvious satire and hilarious satire, and I don't even kind of comprehend in this world why that's such a big freaking deal to so many people.
Oh, there was a big debate over whether it was satire, and there were a lot of people that were like, no, satire is funny. That was not funny.
So many people said they laughed their butt off at it. Yeah. And that's the level of it. That's why I hate these guys talking about punching up, punching down type stuff. Like, there's a realism to it. That it's the same exact thing. You could say it's that same thing about studying humanities. Is it true somebody laughed? Then it's funny.
Yeah.
I'd say true. But no, we should not say that's funny because we're going to have an activistic view that's not funny because it's punching down. But there's a reality that a million people laugh.
No, there's a real reality. Like I said for the longest time, that like the very worst thing that you can say about a joke is that it's not funny. But other than that, like if it's a joke, then it's a joke. You can't it doesn't cause harm.
Andrew Doyle has a chapter on humor in the New Puritans book that I've been reading recently, and he does a brilliant job of kind of breaking down some of the fundamentals of comedy and humor and why it works and how it works. And one of the points that he made is that he was running some workshops, I think in Edinburgh, around the Fringe Festival or something, for young comedians, and the comedians started policing each other on what jokes were appropriate and what jokes weren't, and the concept of punching up and punching down came up, and it eventually came to be that he just could not work in that environment anymore because it just wasn't conducive to comedy as he saw it. But in his discussion on this question of punching up and punching down, he brought up some examples of comedians that are respected that used jokes that were considered problematic. And one of the ones that he has is there's a dark comedian in his world, I think it's in Europe, that made this joke about having given money and support to this fund for this kid who had terminal cancer or some sort of terminal illness. And the punchline of the joke is like, he gave this money on the idea that this kid was going to die, but here it is 5 years later and the kid's still alive, and he feels like he was gypped because this kid's still alive. He's like, I gave the money, the kid should be dead.
Can't say gypped.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah, can't say gypped.
And so, but this guy did. I didn't. He's the problematic one. At any rate, but the point that he made was that many times a lot of these dark humor things, you have to be able to discern the subject of a joke and the target of the joke. And he gives a lot of examples of jokes that are about terrible things, but they point to aspects of humanity or aspects of society or aspects of our lives that are the real target of the joke, even if the subject is something different.
I had the real life inverse of this, and Chris Hanna was there for it, which was like, and I even thought about like what a horribly Seinfeldian George Costanza moment it was for me. But
speaking of which, all of Seinfeld you could construe as punching down, but is the joke really pointing at the down?
Yeah, but like the month that I was the leading candidate for Employee of the Month, just coincidentally, another employee's infant died tragically. And so, like, just as a matter of, like, obviously, and I'm just like, just my fucking luck.
Poor Flip.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, God damn it, of all the months that the baby had to die.
Yeah.
What you're doing is equivalent to blackface, by the way. Dressing.
It's kind of funny that this came up in the same one. Did you guys watch that Bill Reel's podcast at all about Daniel C. Peterson and those guys using blackface for their apologists?
Yeah.
That was an interesting one.
There's one thing about knowing about freedom of speech. You should be able to say anything you want to say, and people can argue it on the merits. And then just being able to read the room and know the optics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Up as us, and then acting like.
But then sometimes some comedy, there was so much comedy where the joke was somebody not being able to read the room and know the optics. Like from the very first time blackface became taboo as a Halloween costume, there was meta jokes about that of like, I'm gonna go for Halloween as somebody who doesn't understand that blackface is bad. You know what I mean?
When Sarah Silverman did blackface on her show, that's exactly
that's what the joke was. Yes,
and it was hilarious and it was perfect.
Yeah, they bring up that example Andrew Doyle does for there was an episode of Fawlty Towers that got canceled for a while because, and the reason was that there's a character in this show that says terrible things, racist, bigoted, old ideas that we don't want platformed. And John Cleese kind of had to respond and say, that's the major. His whole character, his whole shtick is that he's the old guy stuck in the past who can't get over the old ideas from the past. And so seeing him confront the new world is part of the humor. And that's like, if you don't allow darkness into our art, then you're going to lose something. You're going to lose some important aspects of it.
That's like community. Chevy
Oh,
Chase's
yeah.
character.
Yeah.
And the
Didn't have
blackface
to
in
act much.
Tropic Thunder, the blackface in Tropic Thunder is that idiot didn't get that was ridiculous and offensive. That's the joke.
Yeah.
But
then also, because everybody points out Jimmy Kimmel, his Karl Malone, but goddamn, that was really funny. It was good.
And
there's
Karl
nothing
Malone,
wrong with it.
Karl Malone
and it's
wasn't
like,
offended at all.
yeah, and it's like, and I don't believe for a second that the joke for Jimmy Kimmel was like, he's black and I'm racist and I don't like Karl Malone. Like, obviously Jimmy Kimmel was a Karl Malone fan. Like, you'd have to be a fan of Karl Malone to even know how he talks.
There was always something interesting in that too, to kind of realize that the Thomas Sowell thing, he wrote an entire book about it. The black rednecks, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so much of
Karl Malone is the black redneck.
What the stereotype of the black person in the country is like an inner city, whatever. But no, there's black rednecks everywhere. And that was kind of the joke, because people didn't get that Karl Malone was as redneck as the Blue Collar Comedy Tour.
An uneducated moron to shame and humiliate.
Without the miles deep base layer of irony from the church that brought you, asking me questions is literally psychological rape. Now,
I thought that was a great starting clip right there.
Wow.
Asking me questions.
No
So the church is the asking questions is psychological. Is that referring to something? Do you guys know?
He's engaging in the mode of satire in a way that it speaks to his audience's frame of mind, and it's kind of, he's using exaggeration that still makes the point. I think it's good use of satire, even though it's offensive to certain people.
I only think that the flip end of it is we just got done talking about a whole bunch of theory of you can't be asking questions, and I brought up that lady last week who's getting fired in Canada for asking too many questions about the
how does he not
LGBT movement.
How does he not get to have the self-awareness to know that, like, well, you're on the side of, if you ask questions like, well, how do you know if someone is really trans? Like, what, that you're not even supposed to ask that. You're a transphobe for asking that, and you get canceled by Julie Ship or Lori Ship or whatever it was.
I was at a 3 practice meeting last night, and there's this gal that does this recurring circle, and it is supposed to be Chronicles of Racism, or it's on Netflix. Anyway, it's a show on Netflix, and it's Who We Are, Chronicles of Racism in America. And she does this circle every month, and she wants people to come. And she gave this story. She's like, I grew up in this town and I didn't have a problem, but now I didn't notice there was a problem until I had the experience of having Black kids. And now I see that there's a problem. And I wanted so much to ask questions about, like, what is it that's bad about, like, I'm having a hard time understanding why her kids are having a hard time. Like, I'm wishing I could understand, like, but I feel like I can't ask her questions because that's the question you can't ask. You can't question someone's kids having a hard time because they're Black, because it's just a given. Like, that's already a known. I can't ask why, how.
Well, they have that whole thing calling it sea lioning too, but I mean, another interesting thing. I mean, I guess I could sort of pull it up, but there was that thing Dan Ellsworth posted in Thoughtful Face about honest and dishonest questions, and there's every single one of these things. Everybody's got a finger pointing at everybody else and a finger pointing back at themselves, and that's just kind of the ultimate issue that we're all in.
Except for us.
No,
we give the impartial outsider's view.
We definitely do, but Dan McClellan's clean.
Yeah, Dan McClellan's clean. Marty's the one who's told us from the start. It was like, look at you too. But I mean, that's last week. I never got to it, but my title was the 13th Clown. And if you look up what the concept of the 13th Clown is that you have like a circus and there's a bunch of 12 clowns on the stage. If somebody gets up on the stage and starts describing what the clowns are doing, all you got there is the 13th clown. You know, so it's not. Let's see.
Of that amazing Instagram reel that you posted yesterday about that trans woman, or are they non-binary? Alok, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the point that Alok was making about how there's such a push transphobia right now, because so many people, they cannot possibly operate within this fluid type of nuanced atmosphere, because there are things within themselves that need to hold on to this black and white, male female strict dichotomy, and that there are things within themselves that they're shoveling down, and they're projecting that out on a.
Flip, this isn't funny. That's not a joke. This is a podcast about jokes. That's not the joke part.
You said she wasn't funny, Flip.
Yeah, who's made you laugh more this year? Like, come on, man.
Marty.
This once
Marty
again
is officially funnier than Kara has been.
Marty
this
did
whole
it
year.
again. Yeah,
She did it again. No, I just can't.
But there's a realism and there's an activism, and Flip's activism is that she isn't funny. But the realism is that she makes him laugh all the time.
No, but like the thing is, like, it's not. I mean, it's just because it's funny to hear her quote scripture like that. She doesn't realize that she's doing it.
Community and on types of different liberal people who are open to that fluidity, who are open to embracing themselves and not being made fun of it, where they think that if they were not always living up to their gender norm, they would be made fun of. Is that a good retelling of kind of what they said?
Yeah, and they're talking specifically about gender and orientation and things that people and we see it with, like, everyone, the wound that so many of us in this patriarchal heteronormative system that we live in carry, and it's this unspoken pain of being expected to be this ideal, impossible idea of a man, or this impossible idea of a woman, and everyone needs to be striving to reach those furthest ends of those polarities, and if you're not that far, then you're not worthy enough to live in the system. And people carry that, and they feel like, oh, it's not manly to sing or to dance, therefore I will withhold that for myself. And when I see other people who haven't been conditioned to that, to view that as not man enough, and who are just enjoying being whimsical and silly and singing and dancing, and they think, I have to stop that, they have to stop that right now. People who have been cut off from their sexuality, who've been taught that their God-given impulses, that the nature of their being, this source of so much energy and connection and beauty, being who have been conditioned to see that as evil and who are cut off from experiencing that in its fullness, see other people just enjoying their life, enjoying their bodies, and saying, they're walking pornography, they need to cover up so that my repression can stay repressed. Like, and it's like, if you were to just chill out and accept yourself as you are, you wouldn't need to control other people.
That's why I went from slut shaming in the church
So
to being a slut.
we should pause it there. Like,
I really want to know, do you think, could ChatGPT rewrite Miracle of Forgiveness from a queer theory perspective? Because that's what this all is.
That's an
the thing
idea.
is, he sets a straw man of society as though
they do that all the time.
The world, because he grew up in a world where, like, David Bowie was, and Grace, I forget her name, they were doing some gender bending decades ago.
Boy George,
even before
1984.
He's claiming that in the
all
church,
of the 80s
though,
hair rock that I loved growing
it was
up.
the church that stopped it. The world was
Like,
fine. It was the church that stopped him.
The world, like, even in the church, like, there are,
I agree.
There are what would be considered soy boy Mormons. Like, the ideal Mormon is not some hyper masculine, grizzly bear. Like,
Yeah, those aren't your bishops, right?
Right. Like, I just watched Gone with the Wind, and the Mormon, like, the Ashley was the Mormon.
There's also the incredible irony that he's talking about the patriarchal heteronormative society, and he lives in the society that makes all of that stuff possible. Like, you can't do this in Saudi Arabia, jackass. You can't do this in most of the world. And you're in the least patriarchal, least transphobic society in existence on planet Earth in all time.
Well, I don't know. They do have something to say about Muslim people.
I see that, and I'm like, okay, he's saying something that's definitely some part of people in the church, but it's certainly not the whole swath. And I would say that, I don't know.
Well, the thing is, he's posing a problem that I think does exist for some people, as you're mentioning, which is that there are these expectations of masculinity and femininity that don't fit everyone the same way. And so then the question is, how do we then adapt our society to some of these people for whom it doesn't fit? And the liberal answer is you expand what it is that men can be. And so you can be a man and explore aspects that are conventionally associated with womanhood and are labeled feminine, but that doesn't change the fact that you're a man. And you can live in that mode of existence to whatever extent you want to be. And that's kind of the liberal answer to it. That doesn't require society to adapt to the unique, particular spiritual beliefs of a small segment of the population. But what we're seeing, and the reason that there's a culture war over it, is because the other answer is, well, then what we do is we take those expectations of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman as the definition of a man and a woman, and then we force society then to take this social constructivist view, and then we have to upend all of our institutions and the way that we handle society to account for this new definition of what those are. And that's where the conflict is, because that's a unique, isolated, proprietary view that's essentially a religious belief or a spiritual belief about an essence of the human soul, but
Well,
you're
like,
making
you
everybody
can't know.
believe it.
You can't know that you feel like a woman without being in a society that has been that's socially constructed to tell you what a man and a woman is, so that you can feel like one or the other. You know what I mean? Like it's.
But even beyond that, you don't even know what it is. Like any man who says "I feel like a woman," you're using those words and you have a sense of what that is. But because you are not a woman, you actually cannot have access to what it feels like to be a woman. But you can say those words and you can think you know what it means. It means something different from the actual words, because the experience of being a woman is something you have no access to.
Yeah.
But I think, like, 'cause I remember when, like, I think Josh Slocum was the first guy who said it so clearly that I was like, yeah, which is that, like, the whole trans idea necessitates the existence of a kind of soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's dualism. Like, it's like, okay, well, you're already in religion territory there, but they're not copping to it. They're calling it scientists and saying, oh, we have consensus. We have the Dan McClellan style authority. The Bible doesn't say anything about it being wrong. You know, like
talking about constructs. I liked this quote.
Spread is a construct. It is a human invention that people are forced to live within. A construct is a lie. A construct is sometimes a helpful.
Construct is a lie.
The construct is a lie.
Well, she's about to say it's helpful too.
Yeah.
Like a helpful lie. Many lies are helpful,
but it's not lies either.
But no,
here's one for you, Flip.
Or its current implication. You know, I can talk about that and do it in a respectful way and still be like analytical and thoughtful and kind. And
And again, the argument I love is always people are
analytical, thoughtful, and kind. Sorry.
This brings to mind the recent Richard Dawkins clip where somebody asked him about Muslims. Would you like to comment on that? No.
Oh my God.
All this stuff is happening. Would you like to say anything about that? No. Change the subject, please.
Here it is coming up. Here, let me.
Sorry.
Here it is.
courage to talk about Islam. And I know you're trying to say like you think I'm going to get like bombed or something, but I would actually propose that it is 1,000,000 times more dangerous to be an ex-Mormon content creator in the state of Utah, where I had somebody on Facebook said like you should watch out because I've got my Bowie knife and my crossbow or whatever.
A reference to a prophet talking about killing people who have left the church.
Exactly. So I would actually say that it's dangerous to my psyche to go away from the norm and the tribe and my friends and the community and things.
My
Like, danger
God.
comes in a lot of different things, and to say like you don't have the courage to talk about Islam, like other religions are not really my place, but I think that enough ex-religious content creators that we like link arms with hand in hand, there's just so many crossovers between different types of systems that don't let people live up to their best.
I don't feel like she's really addressing the lived experience of actual Muslims that leave their religion.
This is what I like.
It is not.
I've said in the past where it's like she's just not very smart.
It's not even that. Like, if you're talking to an individual Muslim, you don't know whether you're talking to a more rational modern Muslim who specifically rejects calls for violence, or one who still has that in their heart. But if you're a content creator and you've said something that is blasphemous to the fundamentalist violent ones, well, they're going to come after you, because those are the ones who come after people who betray the prohibition against depiction of Muhammad, for example.
Yeah,
and that's
I
why
mean,
the cartoonists paid the price.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? I mean, and I've said this before, and I'm going to get in trouble. I don't know what the difference between our Christian right and the Taliban is. I have no idea what the difference is.
Well, I'm pretty sure if you travel to Afghanistan, you will quickly find out what the difference is.
You can't sell your daughter for money in Christianity.
No.
Wait, did he self-insert himself into that?
Yeah,
green screen?
it's a TikTok joke. Yeah.
Or if you travel to Afghanistan, you will quickly find out what the difference is.
Sorry.
That's problematic, though, what she said, because Islam is a marginalized religion in relative to the Judeo-Christian world, and so that was punching down to some extent because she wasn't.
The Taliban still does biblical style stoning, like where the village.
It still throws gay people off roofs, and that's not.
I mean, if you just subscribe to the ex-Muslim Reddit, and about once a week or once or twice a month, there will be a phone camera video of some execution in the Muslim world because of violations of morality code. You know, they still have family that are recording it and then sending it to them, so they have access to these things.
Jared's joke last week of "This is MAGA country."
Although we made a very serious mistake that I should have mentioned, because we were talking about Pakistanis and we were saying Arabic, but
those are they're not Arabic. They are
Urdu is Hindi but written in Arabic.
Yeah, they're
Yes, I want to discuss a couple things, and one is that in comedy we learn about punching up versus punching down.
Sure.
That there
is that something we learn about in comedy?
Targeting systems and organizations versus
systems and organizations
who have less advantage in any kind of way than you. You know, making jokes based on people's race, for instance, something they have no control over, or making jokes about a person's appearance where they have no control over that. Like, that isn't seen as like good comedy because you're just being mean.
But did they laugh? Did they laugh?
Yeah. Did you learn that in comedy?
Yeah.
To make people laugh?
Anyway, they reviewed some of their stuff, if it was funny or good satire and all that stuff. I mean, that'd be punching. Which direction would that be?
Well, they focused this on the accusation of blackface, so they were able to demonize their critic. But the critic, like, if you're a critic and you're Mormon, you really want to get these guys, just say that they are no better than anti-Semites, because anti-Semites are persecuting a religious minority worldwide because of their faith. And so they make an argument for satirical depictions of Mormons that lampoon and exaggerate aspects of Mormonism and the culture and the teachings in order to make a point and to reveal truth. Well, you could say that all of those anti-Semitic political cartoons that depicted the Jewish banker with a hooked nose, those are all doing the same thing. They're exaggerating things that, there were a lot of Jewish people who were in financial industries and owned a lot of capital resources. That was just something that caused the resentment that drove the anti-Semitism. And so they're just exaggerating truths to make the point. So, like, would they make a video that's like, no, it's not the same as anti-Semitism? I think, no, they'd actually have to say, well, hold on, maybe we need to be careful about, because we are attached to social justice as our driving moral ethos in our content creation, we have to take that hierarchy of oppression and the good way to engage in public discourse incorporate into our comedy.
Did you guys watch this? I sent it to you earlier, but it's kind of going back to the very original video I was showing. That guy talks about your tools that takes down all sorts of like ideas of telos of some sort of previous traditional way of viewing things are also tools that take down your thing, just like Jonathan was just describing right there. And you can use that oppression narrative as anti-Semitism or Mormonism or anything. If that's going to be on the table, it's on the table for everybody. Just kind of joking. This guy's
kind of like, if I like say something and I say I'm oppressed in some way and I cry a little, it's like white women's tears. They have like it. Yeah. They have like a way to like stop their thing from being worked on.
Yeah, Jonathan called it deconstruction for thee, not for me. Yeah. But that's why I'm pulling this up, because this guy kind of makes a case for something like that right here in his rap. So
I love my people with autism unconditionally. Best believe it. But for you to bring it up in a title match for sympathy and expect other people not to talk about it almost seems like you're asking for special treatment. I'm here to dig a hole for you, soul remove and lower you. And just because you have autism doesn't mean I'll take it slow for you. I'll whip your ass like anyone else because that's what I'm supposed to do. But it's a shame you don't understand social cues because you have no idea how bad I'm owning you. I mean, I read up on nonverbal learning disorder as some insight on your brain for me. It said you could read a Civil War book remember every general's name, but not realize it's about slavery. And that explained to me why your concepts can't hit and each angle's a bad miss, because other than General Lee, you really don't understand shit. I kept reading, and I almost felt bad for the geek. But the deeper I got, what did I happen to see? It helps you focus on a task. You are the man with your freeze. It helps you access rhymes. You are fast on your feet. You're less likely to be insulted. That helps you battle with ease. It compartmentalizes thoughts, all your facts and your schemes. So by the time I finished reading, I was mad as can be until I realized the one that's really disadvantaged is me.
And that's he kind of pulls that up a lot in a lot of different raps that he does. He's always kind of pulling the flipped tool on them.
The worm turns.
Yeah, the worm turns. Yeah, there's another one. I'll pull.
It's funny because let's apply Tanner's, rule set to this. Well, the insult rap battle paradigm really shouldn't have making fun of people for things that they have no control over, such as their mama. And it shouldn't make fun of, you can't punch down. It's like, no, it's funny because you're listening to as he goes on in that, and you're like, oh, I feel bad for that guy. But in that paradigm, you should be honored to receive such a vicious roasting, and you should have admiration for the talent that went into it.
It's the definition of roasting, right?
And that's one of the things I wanted to pull. I won't go into it, but did you guys watch the Midnight Mormon stream this week?
Mm.
They got into Kwaku giving dating advice and all that stuff, and he started pulling up Patrice O'Neill, and I was kind of like from the very start. I said "fun strikes back" or something like that, and I was going to kind of point to like how everything's so ticky tacky and touchy in this ex-Mormon world, and the Midnight Mormons, it's part of the thing that blew my mind coming back. Is like the Midnight Mormons are over there talking about Patrice O'Neill and joking and throwing all these cracking jokes, and they're able to be a little bit un-PC over there. And in the ex-Mormon, and so at some point when I came back to the ex-Mormon community, and Jonathan Streeter's joke about the apology is just got everybody freaking out worse than the Mormons, and the Mormons are over here making Patrice O'Neill jokes. That's when everything was like upside down. To me, like, what is going on here? Where's the fun?
No,
like where
exactly.
is the fun?
That was the thing that struck me with Midnight Mormons, is that when you watch them, there's like a congeniality and a looseness and an ability to joke about things that feels much more free than in Mormon stories where everybody has to watch what they say. There's somebody in the comment chat thread is going to call people out for being problematic. Occasionally we have to pause and everybody just disavows some problematic thing, even if we're not agreeing with it, and nobody would assume you agree with the fact that we have to pause and just disavow it. It feels like an ideological prison.
Every time on an ex-Mormon like Facebook page, I see some kind of newly exiting person come in and say something like, "Hey y'all, we got to kick up the sexiness in here. We should be getting," there's some sort of like post like that about we need to be more free about, sexy jokes or something like that. And then they just get a shellacking. They just get slapped down like, "No, we will not do this. Fun will not strike back right now," and that sort of stuff. Then over in the lobsters, they're joking about guys cuddling with guys, and you just stop and go like, "What? When did this get inverted?" And I mean, it's been true of like the entire, like the left used to be the comedy side, and now they're Islam, But this
reminds me of a thing I heard on a Mormon Expression episode way back a decade ago, and somebody commented about like the reason there's no good Mormon art is that part of what makes good art is that you have to be challenging. And you can't challenge anything in Mormonism, and that's what we're seeing with the Blue Church. You can't challenge shit, and comedy is challenging, especially when it's funny.
Plain and simply, I don't think there's any ands, ifs, or buts from like a South Parkian mode or something like that. Jonathan's apology letter was funny. There's nothing you can do about that.
It was not funny. Like, read the letter. It is not funny. It is I wanted it to be as sincere. Like, my mode was
made it funny.
The more honorable and good it was, the more the
Yeah, no,
contrast
that's what I'm
would be
saying.
with what the church has been.
But that's the satire.
The
That's what
church,
happens,
that's
man.
the thing, is because the church would try just as hard to be disingenuous and phony as you were trying.
I wasn't trying to be disingenuous and
No,
phony.
Yes, you were. It was a big hoax.
It was funny.
If the
As
church, look,
So,
I've
here's
done
another.
the same thing. I've done the same thing with how could gay marriage still be true, or how could the church still be true and allow gay marriage? And I feel like it's easy. Like, how many times have you heard, "Oh, it'll be sorted out after"? You know, like, we don't know how it's going to work out. It's going to be sorted out after. I'm like, well, why can't gay people get married too then?
Yeah.
And also, like, because I always heard this. There was the other thing. It's like, well, people will end up where they're happy. You know, because like, thing about Celestial Kingdom is the land of obedience, and if obedience isn't your thing, you'll be happier in one of the lower kingdoms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's exactly how Jacob Hansen believes it. You know, that's right how he says it. Here's another script flip.
Cis white male, I acknowledge that my existence is inherently racist. I've read the books, I've done the work, and I can finally face it. And it's not racist like I think one side has better genetics, but like, I don't think you have a black fan that doesn't have a tentacle fetish. Now, is that wrong? Yes. It's bigoted and selfish. But since all white people are inherently racist, I guess I can't help it. No.
Predetermined.
Even though it's been underground, I still look like a fucking clown. And it's been wrong. Because as the majority, I was punching down and I felt bad. Was I part of this massive machine, cutting off a culture before they could advance and succeed? So I took chances to read all the fantastic cuisine, all the history. I damn near traced it back to Adam and G. And on a global scale, all the demographics are deep. 6 out of 10 of all people come from back in the East. So if 3 out of 5 are Asian, that mathematically means that the real minority here is actually me. And I'm feeling marginalized. I need some acknowledgement. This feeling's hard to describe. I might need a scholarship.
I've been trying to think of the pithiest way to say it, and I've come up with it doesn't matter what direction you're going in, racism is always a dead end.
Yeah.
Like, it just
was
humanity just can't learn that thing. It's like, no, it's just stop.
Well, I mean, there's always like the punch back, and they got to get back for old times and stuff. And sooner or later, if we ever want to get it, there's got to be some sort of starting from. All right, from here we're gonna.
I was thinking about, like, you know, because historical marginalization. All right, like we're all here. Historical marginalization. Barbarian was a Roman imperial pejorative for Germanic peoples. That's all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're historically marginalized. There you go. Yeah. You know, like that's
that
how
word
hard
historically.
It is to do that.
Historically marginalized makes it so eternal. There's nothing you can do about it.
That thing that you said, Flip, where you said that, you know, there's this principle, you know, you're never going to go far if you're in the direction of racism or everything like that's. I don't think that either sides of this debate disagree with that. It's just by capturing Satan and harnessing him for your perspective, you can do that, just like capturing God and harnessing him for your perspective. You could say God is good, and then the religious will capture God, and they get to define God, and then define that's good. But if you capture Satan, you can define Satan, and then you can point out who your enemies are. So by capturing the term racism and defining it in a way that allows you to exert your power and your intentions and reshape society, that's kind of what we've done. And you can still hold to the principle. You're not going to get anywhere if you go with racism, but now we've redefined racism, so now we've created new agents of Satan.
You sound like a Nazi. Like literally, like, and I don't mean that. I mean that as a joke, but not literally. But like, no, like that's every racist ever has justified their position with that kind of thinking.
Yeah, we're live streaming a live stream there.
Wait, they're live streaming right now?
That's live. You want to hear it?
Doing on was fun. Can we just be honest?
I'd like to get them to mention that we're watching.
It was fun. You're like, oh, John F. Kennedy Jr.
I've
coming
only
back
got
from the
like
dead.
another
We all
7
wanted him to do a
minutes.
little bit.
They have more people watching.
They have more of an audience than we do. What's our count? 2?
Oh, it's not.
We have 3.
It's been around 10. It's been hovering there.
Oh, so Marty joined.
143 watching. It's 11. It's 11 right now.
Marty joined and cut our viewership in half.
Yeah, right. Marty always has. Our highest viewed episode was a Marty episode. She's the poll. She's the draw. She's our John Larson.
Yeah.
Check this out. Okay, let's
we didn't even have
review
to,
Jonathan's question. He got
she's not even a diversity hire. She just showed up.
Yeah.
There's so much data here that kind of forces us to change our views. So they were just interested if that was the case. And then one other quick one. Jonathan Streeter said, if all texts are negotiated by the reader for purposes of advancing an ideology, what do you use to make the case that your negotiation of the text and ideology should be dominant?
I don't try to say that my reading needs to be dominant, but I try to share.
But he does.
Yes, you do.
The data.
Yes, you do.
Just
you haven't used those words, but yes, you do.
TikTok, mitigate my ability to share all the data, which is why I sometimes point people to papers and books and things like that. But to the degree I can succinctly share the data, I try to. And just
I hate the way he uses data. I sincerely hate it. Like it's words. It's humanity words. And I've said since. Go ahead.
It's not that. It's that there's a lot of data you can look at. I mean, this is like a Jordan Peterson thing, right? And a John Vervaeke thing. There's so much information that you can pay attention to. The fact that you pay attention to a certain set is going to inform a certain opinion too. Like,
yeah, what you
I
look
was just
at.
thinking about this.
But it's humanities. Like these words, those words aren't numbers. Numbers are. We've talked before on Jonathan's stream. Go check it out. 2 + 2 = 5. That even that they're able to turn dodgy. But words already are that dodgy. Like, you know, if I say the word bachelor, am I talking about like a bachelor degree or am I talking about a bachelor? You know, and
the best example of that in his own
Racism.
content is his twisting and massaging of the concept of homosexuality and saying, well, you know, they didn't have this term homosexuality or gayness. There was just receptive and penetrative sex, and who, you know, and they condemned those acts. And it's like, oh, why didn't I think about that?
He equivocates too, because sometimes he says, no, this is what the original meaning was. And then other times he says, hey, that original meaning is from a different time. And he equivocates when it's good for him, you know. And but then secondly, is there's double meanings and lost meanings and meanings that have been transcribed and translated across time frames and ideas and all this stuff is not data. The original Sokol, we joke about the Sokol Squared, which James Lindsay and Bogosian, those guys made fun of current day activist writings. The original Sokol, that guy was making fun of postmodernism, but he was making fun of how they used fake technical language. So he didn't have to make it. His joke didn't make any sense. He just used a bunch of fake technical language, making fun of the way postmodernists tried to pretend everything they were doing was MIT data technical stuff. Yeah. And he was ripping on them for that. So then Bogosian and those guys later, they found out that they couldn't do that because the modern stuff wasn't just incoherent babble. Right. It actually had like a morality to it. And so they had to figure out the fake morality angle. But Sokol, all he had to do was figure out their fake pretending stuff was data type stuff. And which is kind of funny because the postmodernists were also the ones pointing out that those words are always infinitely deferred. They're not. Yeah.
I think I've watched some of Dan McClellan's stuff that I don't think he's trying to there's a lot of stuff that's just not, you don't feel that political thing being pushed into it. For example, and
for sure,
I think Christianity, like early Christianity, is way different than current Christianity, like evangelical, even Protestant, like where Mormonism was born.
Well, how couldn't it be, for sure?
Well, we're right, but I think there's, for example, it seems, at least, I don't know, I don't pay attention. I'm super close, so I might be just talking out of my butt here. But if like Thomas Aquinas and stuff like that, we're kind of grappling with the issues that we're grappling with right now, as far as some of the, Jonathan Pageau and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, turning it into philosophy when it was
right.
When it
and
wasn't
so
before.
It seems like there were Christians that knew there was a problem all along, and then there was another set of Christians that like dogmatized this thing that was Protestantism, and they tried to make it modern, basically. So like it wasn't meant to be modern, but then they made it modern, and then that messed it up when we found out that the things that they said had to be true weren't true. You know, like does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
For sure. And that wasn't just like a couple times. And he points to like, that's why I get irritated with him, was like he points to large epistemes, to use that Foucauldian term, of like large 100-year interpretations. But even within those 100 years, I'm sure there was like a million different interpretations and changes and groups that came and went and left and died and didn't work. And
I think because like, I mean, because you sort of mentioned at it, is that it seems like people are saying like, we think Dan reads his politics into everything. No, he doesn't read his politics into all of his scholarship. It's just wherever it bumps up against his politics, his scholarship weirdly, will be in perfect line. Most of the time most of the time, like, he is just doing that thing.
But this is kind of my deal. Is when I came at him hot the one time he blocked me, is I told him that he's like an expert at the Dungeons and Dragons rules. And what I mean by that is just like, if you look at Durkheim, like Durkheim will point at the Bible or a Book of Mormon or something, and they'll call it like a talisman. It's as good as like a necklace or something like that. And all the meaning and ideas and whatever people have imbued into over time was all in their heads or whatever, right? And you can maybe get historical about John Johnson in 1912 viewed it this way, and you can argue that, say, what were the rules of the D&D game in 1912 of this talisman, But nowadays, if people are renegotiating, as he says, or whatnot, there's nothing that says that they're wronger or more. I mean, if it's all arbitrary, it's all arbitrary. But this is where the postmodernists, they don't realize they've dissected themselves, is that it's as equally valid, the right-wing interpretation, as his interpretation or the old person's interpretation. It's a talisman that's magical.
That's why it's so poetic that they spend the first 10 minutes talking about comic books and the stories of comic books. And whether or not they know about these, because there's been multiple iterations of Spider-Man and Hulk and Batman, and it reboots every once in a while, and each one takes little bits and pieces from the past generations and then changes things and builds on them, but it's still authentic for the kids and the people who are reading it in that iteration of it. And that is scripture in the world of Batman at that time. And so
it's not real Batman.
Right.
And if a new one comes along and writes his own version of it, if it gets accepted by the canon, or if he's making his own type of, I mean, what do they call that? Fan.
Well, we have that now, though. We have it's happened. Superman's son is gay, or whatever, and you've got a huge contingent of the believers who are like, no, I don't accept that. That's somebody else taking some outside thing and inserting it. It's not the real Spider-Man. And you've got the other people that are like, no, it's a DC product officially from DC. It's really Spider-Man. And this has happened again. And so you have people.
But under their own postmodernism, they're adding the telos or the morality of it must be a social justice answer. That's the additional thing. If it's all just arbitrary constructs, the conservative traditional one, even if they got it wrong, is as right as any one of them. That's the problem with postmodernism. That's how you have deconstructed yourself and don't even know it.
Well, but also, Jonathan, Chris is Star Wars Jewish, and I'm his first disciple.
Yeah, I only believe in the Old Testament.
Like nothing that happened after 1983.
No, you have to tell me that you believe in the Timothy Zahn trilogy, because that.
Oh, I didn't read it.
Was good. What are you kidding?
Isn't it?
The fact that they did whatever crap in these last sequels rather than the Timothy Zahn trilogy is terrible. That was the first book I ever picked up and could not put down.
Ryan Cannell's a big fan of a lot of the books, even after that, and he said he loved a lot of them. But
I gotta get going. But I'm wondering about Zalig's comment. First off, love that movie, one of my favorites. But when Zalig says you're just pissed because he calls out the old boys club. Which old boys club? Mormonism? Patriarchy? But also, have you guys all seen
pissed. Zalig? Yeah, I've seen Zalig, of course.
Yeah, I know you have.
Woody Allen, but
yeah, that's a great movie. All right, but I gotta blast off. See you.
No, our point is that he adds to that whole entire thing, his version being more correct because of scholarly consensus, and we're saying postmodernism deconstructed that before he even started, and that's what we're pointing at. But let's listen to.
Well, another way to say that more clearly is like this: when he says that scriptural texts are always negotiated in the cultural context that it is, and in the past it was negotiated, and we're reading about its prior negotiations. It was valid for that context, and that means that whatever the current negotiation is, it's just as valid as the other negotiation. So to say that because our negotiation contradicts a past negotiation shouldn't really be the big zinger you think it is, because it's simply just a different episteme in the modern age. But you do that with the humility of knowing that it too will be, broken apart and reassembled in some other shape in the future, or in some different context.
And the added level, the added telos of saying that it must certainly be pointing towards some sort of current 2023 iteration of social justice, and the consensus is that we've all landed on that, is as much of a postmodern trick as anything that you'll ever see.
Well,
because go ahead.
That's what he gets mad at Jordan Peterson for, right? He gets mad at Jordan Peterson for interpreting right-wing propaganda into the Bible, and he debunks that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And all we're saying is every ounce of it is comic books, and none of it's, either all of it's invalid or all of it's valid in some sort of way. If that makes sense. Let's see.
This is what the majority of scholars agree on, and try to leave it at that. And if I'm combating another view, I'll do what I can to show that the arguments that support that view are based on fallacies or on false claims or things like that. But yeah, I can't say the way this is the only way to think about it, and you have to accept the way I think about it. That's banging my head against a brick wall. That's not going to do me any good.
And I think you do a phenomenal job of addressing questions and showing the weak view.
Yeah, I don't think that was.
Well, I mean, he articulated a epistemologically humble perspective.
If he was like that all the time, I'd have no problem.
Yeah, I was about to say, is that how he then makes his content? I don't know. And he did invoke the now popular consensus notion of truth, which Neil deGrasse Tyson recently made popular.
Consensus.
But, in the humanities, consensus maybe is different from hard sciences in terms of trying to figure out what the right way is. But
it certainly is different between, depending on how your political leanings are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the added levels, the video that we started out with, I don't know if I can pull it fast enough, but he talks about how the millions of TikTok viewers that view him and think that he's dunking and landing and beating people on this stuff, they don't really decipher that, they think he's scientifically postmodern them, and that's what I'm saying, is that's a contradiction. He can't. That's an impossible contradiction that they set up that they can't ever square. That's in the original Harry Potter video that I was sharing on here. If you listen to the entire depiction of the entire thing, because the postmodernism says all of it's true, and or all of it's equally valid. But
you guys brought up Jordan Peterson a little bit ago, and this is a shower thought. Literally, because I was watching, I think it was that Tanner video and Kara, and they talk at one point about archetypes and how they like to use different archetypes in order to employ their satire and humor. And then, in all the various groups and listening to all you Peterson, it's like everybody's talking about archetypes, and no doubt everybody's read Jungian, whatever, and they know the different archetypes. And I think a better word than archetype is shtick. Because I could just say you're doing this shtick, and it's less philosophically highfalutin, and you're fulfilling a role, doing a thing that we're all familiar with, and we all know, and we know what to expect, and we can probably say what the next thing that you're going to say is. And after a while, you get the sense of what people's shtick are, and when you step into the mode of that shtick, and so now I'm going to use shtick instead of archetype. In my desire to speak more like the common man, and to avoid the fact that I don't know all the different Jungian archetypes and can refer to them.
I don't either. I feel like in the Jordan Peterson group, you could just say, what archetype is this? And people will just say whatever. Like they'll make up archetype.
Well, that's a meme. That's a joke though
Right.
for that.
Right.
But it's, I mean, it's true. It's true that that is all just kind of an imaginary construct as much as any construct type stuff. Like, and I guess part of my point with all the stuff across all the boards is like, are we either all the way skeptical or do we pick and choose what we allow or don't allow? And the answer is all picking and choosing, you know. And there's just some sort of level of like, I can allow it of anybody else that allows it, as long as they're, you know, they've got a bit of the non-aggression principle in there. I mean, I don't know how else to do it, but then as soon as like your thing is incredibly totally wrong, fine, okay, let's look at your thing. You know, that's, I don't know. And it's really frustrating to me. The whole entire thing is frustrating to me because like we listen to the Buddhism episodes that they talked about, or the witch episode that they talk about, and they make so much allowances for these worldviews or these philosophies and all these sorts of stuff, which is fine. I think it's fine. But then you turn around and I mean, they make their cases for why Mormonism must be stopped or whatever, but then themselves, they say, hey, wait a minute, turns out this Buddhism has some rapiness in it too. And it becomes like we talk about, I say that everything's got a Pareto principle. The Pareto principle is usually talking about like the math thing, and you're trying to attribute to different economic philosophies something that's always there anyway. And it's true of like harm causing and toxic people is always there anyway. And you can't, you know, it's like a Pareto principle of toxicity or whatever. You're not beating it by trying to change the systems underneath.
That thing that you're mentioning where they seem to give a lot more allowances to these other non-Mormon traditions than they would ever give to Mormonism, I think is becoming more and more apparent the more that they look at these different, you know, traditions and have podcasts about them. And there's this moment in Tanner's video with Kara where he's talking about how he's so much happier with his life and the freedom that he has and the way he's able to live and everything outside of the church. But if he was to talk to people inside of the church, they have their own concept of their, you know, how the church helps them and the goodness and the benefits that they have in their life. And if he was talking to, you know, the atheist witch or, you know, a Jewish person, and that person was to tell them how much fulfillment, or a Buddhist person, then they would say, oh yeah, that's great, I'm glad for you. But it, you know, in the Mormonism, they are not giving that allowance. And that, I think, walking that line, if you're doing critical media about the church and you want to be able to call out or speak about the parts that you feel are worthy of criticism, being able to still give people the humanity of being able to choose their own values and priorities, I think is a space you have to hold for them. It's kind of like the trap that John Lynn stepped in, where he said that no self-respecting black person could be a member of the church, because that kind of removes the humanity and the agency of black people in the church.
Yeah, it's...
Well, yeah. I have two thoughts. I was pondering, sometimes I feel like it's interesting. Like we can be a little too soft on the church, right? Because it's like there was like a true, like, however it is like to leave kind of a cult, like there was a lot of that kind of happening when you leave. And there's no other way to describe it. Like there's super tight-knit community, whatever, and you leave and you're like floundering. And that's
it's all true.
Right. But then there's the other side of it where, like if you're gonna, I'm sure that there are some like ex-Buddhists that would be just rolling over, like, and being like, "What are you doing, Tanner? Like, you're not calling out all of this, and this in Buddhism, right?" And then,
oh yeah, they made so many like, oh, but we still like this and we still like that. We're still holding on to this in that video,
right? And then the other thought I had is, I don't know if there's like a Western Eastern kind of yin yang thing going on, because it seems like a lot of people gravitate toward those Eastern religions, I've noticed. So I don't know if it's just like a natural thing happening too. Like my husband loves Alan Watts. Like So I don't know. It seems to just happen naturally without like noticing, I guess. I don't know.
Because it's, I mean, maybe because it's new and that sort of stuff, or it seems like you can take it or leave it if you need to, because that seems to be added into a lot of that stuff. But it's kind of funny because you can look at, I've brought up like Spangler and that type of guy before. They point to that sort of stuff as a late stage of their, some of like the ideas of the Tao was their late stage postmodernism to their original type of kind of more conservative religion that helped them grow and flourish. And then it evolved into that sort of thing that became a philosophical change that led to the antinomianism and you know, and all that stuff kind of just turns into philosophical justifications. But then my point always is frequently those philosophical justifications aren't far off from the thing. I want to show that video of Tim Heidegger. Did you watch that one, Jonathan?
I don't recall.
Here, this is pretty funny. Share screen.
Look back at the civilization, the different societies that are the building blocks of our society today, and you see that these guys are doing psychedelics, they're doing mushrooms, they're doing ayahuasca.
Is that where God comes from?
Maybe.
Because it's fucked up if you think about it. Like, there is a connection between our perception of the afterlife and this psychedelic experience.
Wow.
And I'm not I don't believe in God, you know, but I do believe that there is a, you know, higher power.
Wow. That's crazy.
Right.
That's crazy. I mean, I'm an atheist.
Right.
I'm an atheist, but that doesn't mean that I don't believe in God. I believe in God. You know? Like,
yeah, that's fucked up. You can kind of that duality can exist.
yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, when I say I'm an atheist, I say I'm an atheist. I go outside in the street, I say I'm an atheist. Everyone's like, oh, you don't believe in God. That's not necessarily true. I think that I mean, like, there's definitely a heaven and a hell. I think there's definitely because I don't know if you guys saw this. I read something the other day. They found the horn.
Really?
They found the horn. They found the devil horn. The archaeologists, they found this. Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
That sounds like Kwaku.
Yeah, they're just making fun of how those types of things will talk. But
did you feel, because you were mentioning, Marty, the pain and the anguish of coming out of a high demand fundamentalist mindset in the religious paradigm, and I talked a little bit in the beginning of the Steel Tools piece about how the character of the religion that you're in will affect how painful a faith transition is, but also how devoted and literal and concrete you were in the practice of the faith also pays. And I think that's why Flip is like, I didn't care if I left the church. It was like, okay,
it's
another
true
Tuesday.
of me, and it's true of Jared. Like, and I've kind of tried to realize that, but part of the essence of our podcast are guys who got out of it young before too much was invested, you know, and that's part of it for sure.
Well, just the whole mess of like, shoot, do I tell? Like, I went to an Exmo gathering tonight, and the subject was like, I don't know whether I tell people or do I just like do my thing. Like, it's a huge life change, like a huge life change. So
I love this quote by G.K. Chesterton. I believe what really happens in history is this: the old man is always wrong, and the young people are always wrong about what is wrong with him. The practical form it takes is this: that while the old man may stand by some stupid custom, the young man always attacks it with some theory that turns out to be equally stupid.
That's pretty good. Well,
is he the same
Radio
one that
Free
made
Mormon
Chesterton fence?
Yeah, he is. Radio Free Mormon has said frequently that he sees his departure from the church as a graduation. And so when I hear you describing about the difficulties and the trials, and I reflect on my own pathway, it does feel like there's growth and learning and maturity happening in that process.
Yeah, for sure.
And learning about the world and life. I feel like there's aspects of coming to terms with rebuilding your moral framework, your world outlook, and your notion of your identity and yourself after it's all been taken from you is a form of growth that is what I see as a beautiful aspect of that journey outside of the church. Mm-hmm. And much like if you're born in the church and you take it for granted your whole life, you don't really go through the growth that somebody who was a convert of the church had to go through because they had to learn about it and accept it on its own terms. I wonder if we see our journey outside of the church as kind of a form of growth that requires us to, come to terms with ourselves on our own terms. That is an experience we would not have had if we were born outside the church and didn't have any framework to graduate from, so that we were building on our things. And keeping that notion in mind, one of Kweku's strongest points he's ever made in an argument was when people tried to talk to him about the racism in the church. And he says, well, like, what other organization am I going to be a part of that doesn't have some history of racism? Like, even America itself, the air I breathe, has that history. So if I take this, puritanical view about which groups I can be associated or be a part of, then I can't really exist anywhere. And it's an important thing to consider. And as we're seeing the way that secularism and groups of people coming together under some purpose is happening outside of religious paradigms, and we're seeing some of the same problems. I mean, there is sexual abuse, there is financial exploitation, there's all kinds of things that still happen outside of the church paradigm. And it kind of does feel a little bit like that's something worth pondering. And we played a video clip from a TikTok earlier where I mentioned that moment in the RFM debate. And in my discussion on, a week ago, it was, there's more that needs to be said about that. Because I think that we do need to confront. And when I first watched it, I was like, yeah, I feel more like with RFM. But the more I've seen how much chaos exists in the world outside of the structure of some of these religious paradigms that have the evolutionary advantage of the test of time, the more I think that's something that is worth considering. And so when I think about, should I speak out? Should I talk to other people? Jared said it best, where it's kind of like, if you do leave the church, just make sure that you spend a lot of time thinking about what aspects of the structure of the church you want to abandon by considering what they give to you in your life, and whether it's, the sense of different milestones in your own life, or the stability that goes along with holding true to things like fidelity and monogamy and things like that. Those are all things really worth wrestling with, because if you throw those out with the entire structure of the church, as this guy suggests at the end of the TikTok, you may be setting yourself up for a lot more difficulty and instability in your life. And stability has become a much more valued commodity these days.
Listen to, there's a whole podcast, an Aporia podcast by Rob Henderson. And Rob Henderson's been doing a lot of different studies on how stability is way more important as far as like addiction and stuff goes than poverty and that sort of thing in success of children. Way more important. Stability is the big thing he's studying and looking into, and it's like a breakthrough almost. That stability is just huge for kids. But part of one of the issues is with all this religion is, we've always said, going back to Troy and or what we talk about, this evolutionary view of how stuff comes to be, is that you could kind of guess that religion's been like this crude science that kind of lands on something that seems to be more stable, and that doesn't mean that it's absolutely correct, but saying that like constructs are a lie it's probably actually just fell into place because it works. And that's the pragmatism thing. And that doesn't mean that it's exactly perfect out and through, or that you can't write your new myths or stories. I was thinking that, the idea of like old, in Greece and Rome, they had archetypes, kind of like, you called it like a stick, but they like viewed like every single person was a type. Like you're a David type, you're an Achilles type, you're this type. And the goal was, your telos was, you're supposed to arrive at becoming that full version of that type, you know. But there's all sorts of different views of
we
that.
kind of do that with personality tests, don't we? Like,
Yeah, they're exactly the same thing. Enneagrams and all that sort of stuff. And then the best you is becoming the fully platonic version of the form of the perfect type of that type. And
I'm liking my shtick paradigm a lot better now, because I can do one shtick one day in one context and a different shtick the other day.
Yeah,
actually,
I'm not tied to one shtick.
I think, well, that's just it. I think you actually are better. The Christ, become like Christ, would be like more balanced. Like, you're balanced with all of the personalities. You don't just lean into the one that you're good at. You try to strengthen the weak ones. Right? No.
That's
some
an
of those
Aristotelian
personalities
view.
I'm not really good at.
Yeah, the Aristotelian view is get a balance. Any extreme of a virtue or a vice is a problem.
Right.
And I do like that ethic. I do think it's a good one to go with. Nicomachean, or however you pronounce that, ethics. I think it's always been an awesome one that's been there all along. That's not so as weird as Platonic, that you're going to get to this perfectionized form that's also been picked up by the religious so much, or they argue about who started it. But I don't know. All that stuff, you can be skeptical till the end of time, or you can believe it. And I don't know. That's when we just get back to the postmodern problem of it all. But
I think it's worth starting to, like, I'd like to have a conversation that looks at the differences. Like, so we've got like 3 different lenses now that we can analyze the church with. We've got the classic Lindsay Hansen Park versus John Dehlin paradigm, which is the John Dehlin represents, the male mind, as it was put, where it's like looking at facts and contradictions and historical documents and claims and things which disprove in scientific empiric terms the church. And so judging something to be good based on whether it's true in that paradigm is one way to analyze something. And then we've got the Lindsay Hansen Park, which is, no, it's the social impact in how it treats marginalized people. It's the social justice perspective that then we can look at it and judge it where it's good or bad based on that. And then I think the thing that transformed my perspective more than anything else is really listening to people like Eric Einstein and Jordan Peterson advocate for evolutionary evaluation of something. And that's where the characteristic of stability and the ability to both generate prosperity as well as to pass on to intergenerational being aspects of a culture or an existence, and all of the things that are inputs into that, is another way to judge a system or to judge a church thing. And I feel like that notion of saying, okay, and you don't have to invoke Jordan Peterson because that'll get you, blacked off in the first place, but it's that pragmatic thing that Chris has mentioned before, where we can now put on the lens of this evolutionary perspective or pragmatic perspective to the church and judge it and examine it from that perspective. And I think that's where then, just as you don't have to be worried about whether there were contradictions in writings of early church leaders, then you don't have to worry so much about the social justice aspects of it, but you can look at in the life of an individual person and in their family and in a community, because it has something to it that succeeds in that dimension, I think.
But part of it is, and Marty, this is one of Marty's criticisms that's been right from the start, is there's a level of initial detachment where you kind of got to go through an angry phase and all that sort of stuff. And by the time you're doing that, you're doing the academic one step back, disinterested look back at it. And it's tough to do that until you've graduated to a stage of almost kind of like viewing at it. It's like I got to a point 10 years ago where I drive around Salt Lake during conference and all the people were out for conference and I forgot, like, oh yeah, this is a thing. And then this is 10 years later. And like, I have to realize, like, I get so far removed from it that I can start playing the game to give Contrapoints or do is that, oh, well, we're just too close to this and too attached to it, so to stand back and theorize and talk about this from like this level, from this highfalutin view. But I don't know, just like you're saying with that, if I'm able to look at it and understand it better or feel less anger towards it, doesn't mean that it also gives me an answer of what to do with that, or how to act with that. And I don't know.
I feel like just like the issue of the ex-Mormons that jump onto Buddhism or jump onto some other ism or philosophy or movement, understanding in that angry phase and wanting to understand how could I have been fooled, how can they deceive me, how can they manipulate things, and then taking that journey of studying cults and studying the psychological characteristics of the human mind that go into groupthink, that go into how each of us has these vulnerabilities within us that get captured by social groups that bring people into the groupthink paradigm and all of the, things that remove your control from in yourself and get you trapped in systems. And then understanding those vulnerabilities and then reapproaching those groups, being able to hold your own boundaries as to how, then you can look at the church. If you've gone through that process, you're no longer looking at the church in terms of truth claims because you've already dismissed that. Truth claims aren't as important then as the evolutionary features which promote stability and prosperity and intergenerational transmission. And so then when you're looking at it from that thing, then anytime the church does something and asks something of you, you get a little bit more control over how much of yourself you give to the organization. You don't simply surrender all of yourself to it. And it gives you the ability to say no when certain things need to have no said to it. But then you can engage with the things that are good and positive, if you're in a mode to want to do that. The problem we always fall into then is like, does that mean I have to get up on Sunday and go to church?
Well, yeah, but then there's also the level of dang it, I've lost my stream of thought there.
Well, there's the type of person like me would not be able to propagate the church forward. Like if everybody believes like me, like you have to have like TBMs to actually like move it to the next generation. Like it doesn't work to just ride the coattails.
Well, so Dan McClellan made the point yesterday, and I think this is true, is that just like civilization, there's lifespans of religions. And part of those lifespans are over time as it starts turning into that more philosophical justification. And most times when it happens to that, like it happened with the Jewish religion, like it happened with the Eastern Orthodox religion, they kind of start becoming more docile versions of the things that leave open a more Eastern view of like, we can look at this more deeply or think about this and we can take it or leave it or let it go or become, actually I think Christopher from Before the Crow's Nest kind of like looks at it like that it's something that it's evolving and going to evolve anyway into that sort of thing. And there'll be other religions that get as bonky or whatever. But Dan said, he looks through history and says he can see that there's time frames where it has like a stage where it's the initial stage. And those initial stages, you have to realize, almost always help a civilization or a group flourish. And then it gets to like a middle stage, which I forgot to call, and then like a final stage where it starts negotiating with society and starts becoming more philosophical and less stringent could I rejoin with that version of it too? Like, no, I mean, that's the same thing that I go and look at. I look at that Neoplatonism stuff, and I think you might feel the same, Marty, not to speak for you, but we look at it and go, like, I can't do this either, But
I really like, I have a lot of respect. I don't make fun of, but when I try to do it, there's a part of me that makes fun of me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just can't do it. Can't do it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like you can kind of pick and choose your engagement. And, I remember the things that I really enjoyed in the church. And so I still have brothers that are in town now that are attending. And so if they say, yeah, the word's having a chili cook-off I'll be like, dude, count me in. I want to go. So, and then like things like the trunk or treat.
Yeah,
trunk or treat.
There's stuff about it
we could say, okay, well, as an ex-Mormon, when I hear trunk or treat, I can immediately go into critical mode and say, well, trunk or treat is a way to isolate the religious people from the community and cut them off. And it not only denigrates the community by separating the people, and then it doesn't allow the marginalized people into, engage with the community like normal trick or treating does. And it's like, okay, whatever. Okay. Yeah, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say trunk or treat was fun. I enjoyed seeing the costumes. I enjoyed just everything about it was fun. And I choose fun. And so I went, and it was fun. And it was just like, how many times outside of the church have I gotten together with a group of people who, you know, are just willing to have fun like that? It's not common. And I miss that aspect of it. So if I wanted to engage and just go to trunk or treat, then that's fine. If they have other events that are at that level of fun, then I'll do it. But the other thing too is that, you know, we went to a few of the, there's like a group that's like FACT. It's like an atheist group. And I don't go out there saying I'm atheist or anything like that. I'll you know, they're free thinkers is what they bill themselves at. And I'll go to a free thinking thing and everything. But when you go to these things, you don't know what values people have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, do you want to bring your kids to these things? Because when you go out there and you realize how common the ideas that go behind polyamory and different notions that don't align with my values or the things that I would want to, like, you outside of the church, you still have values and you determine what those are. But there's something comforting about being around people where you understand what the values are, what the borders are, even if people don't always keep those values. That's still a thing. Anyway.
Yeah, so I found this channel on TikTok, and oh my, I think it's Kazakhstan or something like that, but there's all these like dancing kids, and I just would watch it and watch it and watch it, and I couldn't stop watching it because it just felt so much to me kind of like mutual growing up and being in that sort of thing. And I wish we learned a skill like this in the middle of that, but this isn't there. This isn't there.
I was never as good as these kids in anything.
Yeah,
as a
but
kid.
I'm saying like it just wasn't there. It's not there in whatever kind of non-religious community that you have. I mean, I guess you could go find it or something like that. But there's something here that, like, if all the kids and everybody in your neighborhood was out going to this, that, I mean, you got to know that we're missing out on that, or, you know, removing it from our world in these ways.
I think it's just not as
in the name
easy.
of modernity. Yeah.
Like,
well, my brother is. Go ahead, Marty.
Well, I go hang out with some atheists poker night, and I was kind of having this conversation. I was giving them this sentiment, and one of them basically said, like, and I think I was able to verbalize it like, well, church is like an automatic community, and so it's nice. Like, it's nice that you have that, like, structure already, right? That stability.
Mm-hmm.
And he made the point, he's like, isn't it nice though when you have to work for something? Like, when you have something given and handed to you, you don't like appreciate it as much as something you work for. And I was like, yeah, that's actually probably really true. So, like, if I was able to go out and like start a 4-H club or something like that, where you could get that kind of community. I say that because I did try it and it was super hard and I stopped.
Yeah, I know you've been trying, and you've been at it. You've been at it not just talking and communicating.
Well,
with
I'm kind of
lines.
Well, that's been kind of I think I've benefited from that for myself, but I'm just like, my kids, I'm still using the church because they still go to the activities during the week.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, I wish they could be like, I think healthy kids are off their phones. Like,
yeah.
Well,
sure.
yeah, that's an important dimension to it. But my brother attends a branch in Spanish-speaking ward that's small, and he's over the youth, and he's like, the youth program is dead. Like, the kids show up and they're on their phone, and we can't get them off of their phone, and you become the enemy if you force them off of the phone. And there's like, it seems to be impossible to engage them. And now that the structure of scouting is gone, it's even harder. And so I kind of lament that, because there were aspects, I know there's aspects of my character and my understanding of my own abilities and my resilience that were learned through my experience in Scouts. And then so trying to find some parallel thing to give my kids is hard. And that thing you're mentioning in terms of it's hard to build something, like, when you're growing up and you're young and you're just looking in your one moment in time, you don't really understand, I think, the concept of the seasons of your life and how your priorities and your contributions to your community change, and your ideas about how you want to engage your community change. And so there was definitely a period of my life where I was a taker from the community. People planned and did things that I participated in and benefited from, and they put a lot of inputs into that, and I didn't. And I think the understanding over the span of a life is that you eventually will get to a point in your life where you become the person who contributes, who puts in and makes things happen for the other generation. And that becomes part of the legacy chapter of your life, where you want to do that. You want to build something for the next generation, and it feels good and it gives you purpose at that moment in your life. And by then, if you've been participating in this game that gives you prosperity and builds on the past, you've achieved more wealth, and you're able to be the giver in that chapter of your life. It's usually older people that have been able to achieve that. And I see that happening in the Lutheran community that I've engaged with for community theater. And so I feel like, because there's no structure that spans an entire life that supports and builds and organically maintains itself like exists in a religion outside of the church, even in an organization like 4-H, it's hard to see how to recreate that.
You're having me think of, like, I feel so bad that kids nowadays aren't experiencing. I mean, those kids are from nowadays, but that's obviously inside like a certain religious community. But I feel so bad. Like, I look at that and I remember being a kid and experiencing that too. But as you're talking now too, I also remember the fact that I got to experience interacting with so many different old people. And where's that? Like, where's a place where I go where I'm dancing around with kids, but I also get to know 50 different people over the age of 70, and
you have a different relationship with like a young women leader than you do a teacher. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the 4-H thing. And I think when I was a kid, it was flourishing, and there were a lot of kids, and it was worth a lot of parents' time. And right now, it's, at least with we did dairy. We showed dairy cows, and so there's no one left. Like, there's a few like stragglers that are really trying to make it work, but it's so much work, and my kids hate it. They're like, cows stink. So I'm like, I'm not going to force you to do something that you hate, and it's really hard for me. So
yeah.
So
it's a win-win.
It's been one of my arguments from the start too, and it's like unfortunate to say, but I mean, it's been from Jonathan and Jonathan's channel too. But there's the whole added level of it's not just that we've lost some sort of heart or some sort of interaction, but it's also puts the civilization in a dangerous, precarious spot to be taken over by something that could be far worse than Mormonism. And that's part of my complaints with the people rationally or critically examining it. Like, if you're at some level where you're saying Mormonism is worse than how Islam treats gays or something like that, you're not evaluating correctly. That doesn't say Mormons are great with gays. It's just, you're not ranking right. It's that when we point to Sam Harris, when he got just so in his head about Trump, and he says, I don't care if over in that Biden family there's dead kids in the basement. Trump defrauded people at a college. And you go, okay, both are bad, but like, if that's true, you're not evaluating stuff right. You've got your heart up in this, and it's the same thing when we go back reviewing the church. Like, if you're too close to it, you're just so angry at it that you can't step back and rank it properly. You're scrambled. But
I've been thinking about Joseph Smith and what he represents in the mind of a believer, in the context of what I've seen happens with a lot of ex-Mormons, where when you let go of Mormonism, to some extent, you let go of idealism. And you start to see, well, nobody, everybody's a piece of crap, and then you start, at least in my cynical brain, you're like, there's no good. All these good people are really corrupt, and I don't want to trust a good person, and so And then all the choices that I may make in my life are just whatever I've made of my life, and they are just what my life is, and there's nothing good or bad about it. It's just my life. I haven't hurt anyone, so I'm okay. And there's some, truth to that and whatever. But I feel like there's something. Christ is this perfect ideal figure that you can aspire to, and nobody can ever be like Christ. But because he's unreachable in the minds of their followers, then he represents an ideal that you can kind of aspire to, but you don't. It's like, I'm trying to be like him, but nobody's perfect, so that's fine. But Joseph Smith is like this character who represents this achievable ideal. Like he was a man, he was mortal, he made mistakes, but he was this good man, and this good man exists. And this good man then is something that I can aspire to in my life. And because it's something I think I can achieve, then I can look at my own life and I can try really hard to make good decisions in my life with whatever moral paradigm that I have in. And so it was something that is loosely metaphorical, but like the whole experiment where if you just drop a rat in the water, they'll swim for a little bit, but then when the hope is lost, they'll just die. But if you drop them in water, let them struggle for a little bit, then you lift them out a little bit, and they get a sense that they have the ability to achieve something, and then you put them back in, they'll last a whole lot longer because they have a sense that they can survive, they can do something. And so having some achievable ideal that drives you, that gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of, there is a reason to make better decisions in life and to look at what those better decisions are, and that my just carnal impulses or my whims don't necessarily need to drive me. I can look for ideals and pursue them, as something that you kind of lose in that. And you lose the notion that there can be good men if you don't, good men, I'm not talking sexist, I'm just talking about good people that you can aspire to be. And it's I think I have these conversations with my son because there's these pits that we fall into in the nihilism of having let go of the church, that I don't want my kids to not have something to hold on to and to look up to, and to feel like there is a sense of goodness and a sense of purpose that they can have in their life. And it's something that I struggle with. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I can appreciate Joseph Smith for the role that he kind of plays in fulfilling that achievable potential ideal, regardless of all of my criticisms of him, which are many.
Yeah, I don't think I ever looked at him like that. That's interesting.
Well, you may not have had the experience of the young men where it's like, gosh, Joseph Smith was 14 and he was talking to God, and here I am, I can't even control myself in the BBC.
That is probably what it is.
And then you find out that he wasn't so perfect, and you go, maybe I'm not. You hear all sorts of people say that they find out somebody wasn't so perfect and it helps them or something like that. But
yeah,
I mean, his faults. You don't have that maybe in other religions where it's just Christ and that's perfect and you can't do that. Like you're saying.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I tried it. The problem is, like, I'm so far out of it, I almost can't remember. Like, I almost can't remember what I used to think about. I think I remember, because I'm one of those persons who, some Mormon who will be accusatory will say, "You never believed." And that just doesn't spike my heart. It doesn't pain me. I just kind of go, yeah, I kind of didn't. And I tried to get there and all that sorts of stuff. And I know other people did. But to me, a lot of the Book of Mormon and a lot of the Joseph Smith stuff was always something that I kind of just sat there like going, I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to get this. And
yeah.
But.
And every time the book of Isaiah came up, everyone's like, oh yeah, it's real deep. There's so much to learn from that. And I'm just like, I can't stay awake for a page.
Well, I remember being a kid and thinking about Nephi and Lehi and all them, and I could not picture, it was a cartoon in my head, and I said, take this out of cartoon. And I couldn't take it out of cartoon. Does that make sense? It's like, no, this is only a cartoon.
Wait, did you watch Living Scriptures as a kid? Is that why?
Yeah. And I was like, but was this a guy? No, it's just that cartoon. And I couldn't get it out. And I went on my mission, and I even said it. You could ask my parents or something. I said it from the podium that I didn't have a testimony yet, but I'll get one out there. And I went out there and I never really felt like it hit that hard. So I have to be aware that that's a different experience than some other people. But then my long process, because I think there's something about Joseph Smith and going through that whole process and then maybe reconciling all that sort of stuff that maybe also gives me a hero's journey or a type of ability to go learn about stuff in life and then reevaluate it, that maybe your son also doesn't have, because he doesn't have the starting thing to first question and then go back and reevaluate.
Right.
All right. Yeah. Like, so how old was your son?
Well, he was 16 when we left, and he's like 26 now. But that's the thing, that he didn't have the system necessarily to graduate from.
Yeah,
like we were talking about a little bit ago, and
Needs
so
to be
that's
converted to something. It sounds like.
Well, he was anarcho-capitalist for a while, but thankfully he's kind of graduated from that. So we'll see.
Oh,
Isn't
I don't know.
that
I
what
think
Michael Malice is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But there's a loss of ideals, like even in my own personal life. Just, I had the breakup of my first marriage was a very traumatic thing for me to endure. And, I went through a lot of, like, I set up a support group for survivors of infidelity, and met and talked with a lot of people that were processing similar sort of things. And it was a difficult thing to process. And it kind of served the purpose of destroying the notion of marriage and love in my mind. And it took me some time to get to the point where I think part of it was because of the person that I subsequently met, but then understanding and seeing that there's something to the commitments and just the ephemeral characteristics of marriage and what it represents, that I wanted to recapture and rekindle and turn marriage into something that was meaningful for me and that I allowed to enrich my life in ways that I got to shape and form and determine what they were for me. And and so of course in every aspect I try to find a Lord of the Rings connection for it. So there's that moment where Faramir asks Frodo if he was Boromir's friend, if Boromir was a friend of his, and Frodo's response was, "Yes, for my part, I was a friend." And when I think about relationships that are broken or betrayal happens or anything, all you can really do is be authentic and have integrity in your part of that relationship. And the relationship is defined by the importance that you give it and what you contribute to it and how you shape it. And so for me, recapturing that for marriage and understanding that I don't have to see it as this old, archaic, outdated thing. I can bring to it what meaning and purpose it has and allow it to enrich my life because of what I get put into it and what I have to it. And part of it, I think, was influenced also by witnessing some of the marriages by this particular pastor in the local Lutheran community. Some of the kids that I was involved in community theater with ended up getting married, and they have a really beautiful paradigm of having the vows be one that starts with the couple and extends to the family and then extends to the community of people around there, each of them making a commitment to support the couple in their marriage. And that binding commitment that it was inclusive of the community that you were brought into was part of the values and the things that I felt were important about a marriage. And so, over the past year, I kind of secretly changed my position on it, and I had a sense that my girlfriend at the time had also readjusted her position onto it. And I didn't want to talk about it beforehand because we'd had some conversations about what marriage would be, and it needed to have a degree of, something that both parties really wanted, and not something that was out of convenience or out of practical concerns, but my wife is a hopeless romantic, and that's part of what I love about her. And so, I did the proposal and we did get married, and we turned it and shaped it according to the things that were important to us and made sure that our community was involved. And I was fortunate enough to have the same pastor do the ceremony, and I wanted to capture that element of it that involved the wider community of the people here that are important to me. And so that's just a long glimpse into that aspect of my life that comes back to this point of I've started to find in my graduation phase that taking more ownership of what meaning I bring to the things that I include in my life becomes very important. And I feel like it's accessing a form of adulthood that I haven't really had before, because I've kind of ridden my life out in sort of a passive mode, and I'm trying to take the steps to do more than that.
Yeah.
I asked on your wedding pictures, but I don't. Was that Lord of the Rings imagery that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We like I said, we took the stories that were meaningful and important to us, and we found the things that involved connection with friends, family, and loved ones in each of those stories, and wove them into it. So there's elements of the Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Yu-Gi-Oh, Zelda, and the things that we've found connection over ourselves, as well as things that we've shared with other people that we really enjoy. And so the tables, and each table had like a different theme. There was a Star Wars themed table, and a Zelda table, and a Lord of the Rings table. And then I cut the cake with the sword that was reforged, and it was kind of a representation of kind of the fracturing of my life in the middle of it, and then reshaping it back together into something that was stronger and served an important purpose for the next chapter of my life. And so we tried to just inject those things. But I think we're taking these mythological stories that have meaning and purpose and importance to us, and then infusing them in our lives, and allowing those things to kind of stand in it. And I can understand it's no different than people who do that with scripture.
Yeah.
It's just a different mode. And so I am able to easily see people who do this with stories of Mormonism or any other faith tradition, and understand that. And I feel like that's an important thing to do. And so I'm happy to do it. And it feels sort of religious, but I can pick and choose a little bit.
That just made me think of, okay, so we were talking about earlier how, like, okay, well, if religion's gone, there's going to be this gap. But then you see comics and stuff like Marvel movies are really big for people. Like, I feel like there's other things that are filling in the gap. So why do we need to be worried, I guess? And even if we need to be worried, like, can we even do anything about it? Like, why be worried about it?
Marvel movies are not going to help you move the same way the Elders Quorum would. They're not going to make you a casserole.
I think both of you two are doing a great job of actually trying to do the stuff, because you have all these ideas and these ideals and myths and community theater and all that sort of stuff, but you actually try to reach out too. You try to get other people involved, or try to meet other people, or even if it's just the Mormon church again, or it's a theater, or it's the Lutheran church, or it's whatever. But I mean, I guess that's probably the answer to it, is not top down. Like, not top down, somebody decides I'm going to make one thing. It's probably just keep reaching out, and it will congeal from the bottom up. That's probably the answer. But
I think we add to our neighborhood. You know how some neighborhoods, like, just people keep to themselves, and they just go into their house and they go out of their house.
It's me. It's me, and I'm a critic of me for that. Like, I need to do better at that. I'm not.
Well, it's like
I should get to know my neighbors.
We already knew everybody, and we could have just disappeared when we stopped going to church. It would have been really easy to just have that kind of relationship with the neighbors. And our kids still play together. So the kids, I don't know. I've had relationships with like kids, but not their parents, right? Like, because anyways. But we've made an effort to, like, stay in touch with them. And we have kind of a cool cul-de-sac, because like only half actually go to church. I think there's two that are maybe, the one's like Jack Mormon, but he's a part of us. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's a cool cul-de-sac. And we have the Jack Mormon over for poker night to drink. And then the Jack Mormon gets a blessing from the other neighbor when his mom dies. Like, that's kind of the relationship we have.
That's got to be the answer. Is just keep reaching out until the thing congeals and becomes it self-formulates evolutionarily. You know?
And the church will eventually have space for people like you. They'll remove. I mean, we're already seeing people who are like, they called me to be in the bishopric. I told them I didn't really believe. I'm just kind of there. They said it doesn't matter. So here I am.
Yeah, I think if you can figure out to be cool with them, they'll be part of that bottom-up thing that can congeal together. Like,
yeah. Well, they've already got that structure, that stability, right? And they just need some more bodies.
Well, speaking of that, like this whole population undercut thing where we're not generating enough babies to replace the population is I feel like we're seeing that. That's what the way the churches are now, where there's like this shell and then there's very few views and then not enough people for things. Like, just to take that and project it to wider society.
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah, for sure. This is like, I just heard Elon Musk stressing about it this week on some interviews, because you look at the numbers and that's just how it is. But,
and the irony is like the Handmaid's Tale like proposed a future like artificially where that happened, and then all the things that people had to do to try to bump up the baby numbers, and she's going to live to see a world where that impending crisis is going to happen anyway.
Uh-oh.
So Spengler tried to pull from history, and one of the things that he claimed from all of his studies of looking, and of course he labels them out because he was autistic in that way, but the second people start planning kids is the second it's already over, and
well, it takes a while.
It takes a while, but yeah, that's the beginning of the end, because
I guess
the civilization that just
it's over once it starts.
Pumping them out.
It's just a cycle.
Yeah.
Well, how do you communicate that to your kids? Like, that's one of the things in terms of the evolutionary perspective of the church. It placed this value on families and children and stability in a family, and I think that I benefited a lot from that. And it's hard to say that in ex-Mormon communities, because they'll be like, oh, that's just the nuclear family, you have to explain. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. But there's only one video that I've ever taken down on my channel that wasn't because of copyright strike. And it was a response to a BYU professor who makes the case that promoting a nuclear family statistically has a better outcome in terms of how the kids are and everything like that. And so his position was that we should develop policies in our society which promote or make it the incentive such that people want to have that family structure. And that's kind of how we should shape our society, because there's across multiple dimensions. If you have two parents in a home and a stable home, they have that. And so, of course, earlier John went in and broke that down, because there's arguments you can make that that's not how you want to drive things, because you want to account for all different types of people in all different situations. But the more I see how if you let go of that structure and you say that that is old cis heteronormative archaic stuff, and you've got to have these new paradigms of family, then most of the people are just going to polyamory. And there's not, why do we need to get marriage certificates and marriage involved? And it's just, it doesn't usually involve kids so much. And if it does involve kids, it's involving a family paradigm, which is going to tend to be more chaotic and not stable.
We can, I've pointed out before, but we can look at it right here, and I don't have problems like criticizing myself with it, but we can look at the people who got out young and how many kids we all have, and the people who you can say you got out older, it was like more difficult for you, but you guys, Kevin, you all got a bunch of kids and a ton of kids. All the rest of us that got out at 20, 22, Jared's got a couple kids, but the replacement rate's 2.1, right? So he's got to have one more. There's a flip, me and Jared were under replacement rate, but you guys who got out later, you're way over replacement rate.
The other dimension to it, though, is I feel like in my life, the most rewarding, the most gratifying, the most inspiring things in my life were around having kids. And when I say inspiring, I mean, I need to be a good man, a somebody that my kids can have faith in, can trust, can feel secure in, and that drives me to be a better person, and it drives me to place them as a priority. And I feel like that has broader ripple effects. If every person in society has something to give them that type of inspiration, it helps our society as a whole, because we're all interdependent. The things that we do both benefit and help each other. And so I want my kids to be able to have that type of positive experience in their life as well. But if your kids are steeped in intersectional feminist theory, it's harder to advocate for that, because they'll say, oh, well, you're advocating a harmful old, cis heteronormative paradigm.
I was curious. You said early John. Did you have like a moment where you got to where you are now? Like
what do you mean?
You were just referring to early John put up that video.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a moment where my perspective changed, and it was the first time I listened to and considered the Sam Harris Jordan Peterson debate, and that was my first introduction into.
Was it like a shelf crash thing, or was it just really gradual?
No, it wasn't shelf crash. It was, I had been noticing what was happening with social justice movements and kind of the circular firing squad and illiberalism becoming the new morality and condemning liberalism, and then trying to understand, I don't know, the positive things in the church, and making sure that as I kept my journey beyond the church, that I could still hold on to things that are positive in there, and then but then just kind of hearing that whether or not something was true may not be as important as how it enriches your life and how it promotes stability and prosperity, and looking at your life as one part of the multiple generations of the human species, and seeing humanity and future generations as a positive good and a virtue. I think all those things kind of came together in that, and it didn't mean that I say, oh, the church is good and perfect and I'm going to go back to church, but it meant that there's a good reason to look at it differently and to take a different analysis of it. And I think that, and then combining with the groupthink that I started to see happen around social justice, understanding how the community that I was in turned me into an enemy around that hoax, what people call the hoax apology, that I felt was a piece of satire.
That was around the same time?
No, I think that preceded it.
Oh.
Yeah. But that's the thing that I try. If anyone is like, well, what do you think? I think listening to those Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson debates is important, because it really does wrestle very much with the question of objective truth versus pragmatic truth, and that's an important thing to wrestle with, I think.
Yeah, I was a TBM when I listened to those.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah.
I had almost kind of the same trajectory, although I was, by the time those guys were talking, I was a little more along those lines. Like I wasn't, like that one didn't shock me out of it, but it was somewhere around there. But I had slow, I was in the middle of these wackadoo humanities departments when they were at their peak with nobody pushing back on it, and then I slowly kind of just started coming out, and then looking back at Mormonism, that really ultimately just has to, like, this is one of the problems with me in my life, is that it works for my family. Like, there's not one person that I know of that's having a tough time with it in my immediate family and most of my extended family as well. And it's just like they live in Lehigh, they live in that little bubble, they live in that perfect thing, they have perfect little lives, and all the little kids are happy doing all the BYU things and all these. They still live in that 1990s world a little bit. They've got a bubble of it, and you don't want to pop the Shire, you know what I mean? And I don't want to take the Shire away from them, but I can watch them too as they evolve. They are evolving the way that prediction that Dan McClellan was talking about is evolving. They're becoming more philosophical about it without a huge crisis. Does that make sense? And it's just, I'm just seeing it happen.
So we want to be Merry and Pippin and Frodo and Sam returning to the Shire. appreciating what's beautiful about
There's a
it.
scouring of the Shire though that could happen.
Well, the
too.
scouring of the Shire
But you
is
can't
what's
go back to the
happening
Shire.
with Saruman. Well, that's the problem, is that the Shire wants to kick us out for now. But they'll you know, we still got the Midnight Mormons are cool with us. Jacob Hansen is cool with us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'd much rather hang out with those guys than secular moral Puritans.
my label. So I had in Thoughtful Saints. He referred to his brother as an anti-Mormon, which I hardly consider Forrest an anti-Mormon. Like,
You
and
don't?
so
I think
like,
wouldn't
I was
Forrest
like,
call
wait.
himself an anti-Mormon? Forrest, I saw you commenting somewhere.
Yeah,
He might
yeah.
still be here.
Well, I was like, wait, what? He's an anti-Mormon? And then he's like, yes. and I
Forrest was?
responded, no, Jacob Hansen responded.
Oh yeah,
and said, yes,
I saw
yes.
that. I saw that.
And then I responded right before I jumped on, because I assumed by guilt by association, if Forrest was, then I was. So that's why my label said anti-Mormon. But he said, no, you're just a critic, a light
There it
critic.
Anti
So-
for life. That's how I felt 2008 and 9 too, though. You know, I really was down that route. Although one of the reasons like I get along with my family is I never took it at them. You know what I mean? But I took it at other people.
I did for a little while. It was straining some relationships.
Yeah.
The fun thing is,
I
though,
definitely strained mine.
I feel like I can still do those conversations, and I do try to follow like a 5-to-1 rule, but I feel like there's a couple things. I don't feel like I need to anymore, but if something comes up, I will take a jab. Like one time my dad was going off on something about Joseph Smith being awesome, and then I made some like snide remark about his bank failing or something. Like I just like, I don't know. I think you can build
You're just a
relationships.
Debbie Downer.
That's right.
I will never, even though like I can see some kind of errors now in some of the arguments, I will never not love Christopher Hitchens. I mean, I just, the way he talks, the way he was, the way he took it on people and all that stuff. I also don't think I think he'd be reevaluating some stuff. Not saying that, well, he did reevaluate it. You can watch in the Doug Wilson debate that towards the end of it, he was saying, I don't want to abolish it off the earth. I think we need it for our mythology and for our understandings of literature and all that sorts of stuff. And but you know, he also had his very sharp way of being. But I for sure know he also wouldn't fall down the social justice path. Well, we already knew because he was already arguing against that too.
Well, that's what's frustrating about, you know, that I mentioned Sam Harris versus Jordan Peterson, and then what we've seen Sam Harris turn into validates his loss in that, you know, battle of the wits. But there's still hope for him. He was brave enough to actually side with J.K. Rowling in an unambiguous way in his recent discussion of the witch trials.
But as we pointed out, the thing that Sam Harris did is he just ended up arguing for pragmatics. You know, he said, I'm going to go, I don't care what's objectively true. I'm going to go with what's morally true or something that should be better or something like that. And that's the point of that. But another guy, one of those four horsemen, Dan Dennett's whole entire thing for 5, 6, 7 years has been reevaluating this evolutionary view of it too. For a while.
Well, and my perspective is not an abandonment of the objective reality perspective. It's just kind of understanding that there's importance to the objective reality, but there's also an not insignificant and possibly very significant component of the pragmatic aspect of it. And I really liked what Jared said a few episodes ago when he was like, if someone was asking me if they should leave the church, I couldn't tell them to stay, but I would say, you know, be really careful about what things you abandon, what values you got from the church that you would throw away, because you know that's treacherous.
He said he was pro-police during BLM. Sam Harris's podcast right after George Floyd was one of the best podcasts ever.
He took a lot of heat for that.
It's so good. It was so good. It's so good. But I mean, I'm sure he'll, when he can get his mind away from and realize how irrational he got, and I think he might, about just his hatred for Trump, which doesn't mean he has to like Trump at any point. It's just like he realized his scales got out of whack because of so much extra hatred. I think he can I mean, I think you can pull out, for sure. Dan Dennett's done really interesting stuff about like kind of reevaluate. I mean, one of the things he talks about a lot is, and even Bill Rill and those guys are talking about this now, is the concept of ritual and the concept of liturgy and going and all facing a direction and acting a thing out. And Dan Dennett's one who started talking about, like, we got to recreate some of that too. And you can do it a bit in theater. Theater does it a little bit, but actual liturgy has like the audiences moving to, they're like,
I can't do it. I tried. I went to the Lutheran thing and I started having
goofy.
It was goofy. It was a little temple reminiscent, and it just didn't have the magic that it does for the people.
This is what they call like the postmodern condition kind of thing. Like once you start thinking of postmodern stuff or becoming self-aware and meta like this, you can't get unmeta. And they say it's a little bit like you've been exposed to technology, and no matter what, you can't go back to say, well, I'm going to just forget technology exists because I'm done with this. Like, no, it's like we're technological creatures now. There's nothing we can do about it. And it's kind of the same thing about we've got to try to sort that out. Like, I'm not going to be able to
naturally do it, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of can naturally get into that kind of, like it happens during 3 practice circles. Like there's this I don't know.
Tell us more about your cult ritual. 3 practice circle.
Definitely. Yes. It is definitely. There's like a community there of refs, and definitely I should do the culty test.
For the 3 practices?
Yeah.
I don't think it would rate high. The thing that, well, I mean, I think finding something that's important to you and has meaning to you is important. And in the event of like trying to inject meaning into my own life and take control of those things myself, one of the things that I remember my daughters really loved, and I've talked about this before, was the Father's blessing before a school year. And it was meaningful to them. It was something that anchored them, I think, in their relationship with their father, but also in the security of their home and their own ability and things like that. And so a few years ago, I created a Father's blessing type thing for my kids. And it was, I tried to say, okay, well, there's symbolism in different things. So, the typical Mormon paradigm is the child sits, the father stands, the father's above the child, the hands are on the head. There's a superior and an inferior thing. So I said, I'm going to change that a little bit, and I want to see my kid. So it's me sitting in front of my kid on the same level. And then there's still the physical connection, I think, is important. So holding their hands. And then instead of a prayer, it's just, this is a ritual, but it's just an expression for me of my love for my child, of my hopes and aspirations for them to achieve their potential, and a knowledge that they have that we're on their side. And so like doing that for each of my kids was probably more impactful to me. And you can say I felt the Spirit more doing it on my own terms in that way. And then the next year, my daughter, who was too young to have had that experience in Mormonism, asked me about it and said she wants to do that again. Like she remembered it. It was important to her. And so I think that's where the concept of finding the things in Mormonism that were meaningful, recreating them on your own terms in ways that don't strip your autonomy or your authority, and then adding those things that you think are meaningful from whatever thing that if I wanted to put in a Lord of the Rings phrase and I could fit it in, I would have done it. And just the myths that carry meaning for you that you want to convey, I think it's a fun part of this chapter of the life. And
it's fun, but it's a little bit limited. Like I said, I can't find a place where I would take some 13-year-old to Mutual, and in that same building, there's some ladies having art night, and somehow you wander over into the art night room and y'all talk to each other. And then, there was just some level of forced interaction that I don't know where to recreate that.
Some people hate that though.
Yeah. And
they think it's
they
superficial.
benefited for it.
Yeah, well, my kids hated piano, and then I got to the point where like, I'm not going to force you to do it. Now they're like, why did you stop forced me to do piano. Do you know how much I would have loved
You're
to
a
have
terrible
this piano
parent.
skill set?
Noam Chomsky days says for.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's important, but that's like, if you're doing Noam Chomsky Day, you're placing value in some external thing. You're not placing the value in the connection with the people. But that's my own personal philosophy. I think each person will find their own different way to do it. But for me, I mean, if you were to say, yeah, this ritual is important, you got to do it, then I could say, well, I had this experience, and I can understand how some rituals might have important meaning that, you know, can do something for the cohesion in a family or the mindset of a child and even a father.
Yeah, I couldn't stand all the times I had to kind of like suffer through all like little things where I was watching some ceremony of the young women or some old age or some stuff like that. And all of it in hindsight was the best parts. You know, it was so good that I was there interacting with those people and getting to be around and see them or pay attention to the stuff that they care about.
So then, like, understanding these things and then just blindly saying, oh, the kids these days don't have it. Like, if you were to say the kids can find something like that, that's important, where would you look? How would you, or do they already have it?
If I had a couple kids, I mean, I guess I don't know, because you'd poke around until some of it would be trial and error, I guess. And I know Marty.
Like, I talk to my kids about, you know, do you have groups of friends that go to the mall or, you know, I'm taking my old 80s and 90s paradigm and I'm trying to project it onto them. And they're like, no, we meet up in Discord and we do a D&D session over the internet. And I have a friend in Oklahoma and England, and that's how we get together. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And here I am on a podcast with probably only people that I...
Yeah, it's true though too. But I mean, I talked about this one time. I lamented the fact that we didn't have old school regular television in sick days where you were forced to do nothing but watch Golden Girls. And then you realized Golden Girls was really good and you liked the lives of these little old ladies, but you had a time frame where you weren't just like spoiled with choice. You had nothing else to go with, but like, oh, I guess I'll go with Golden Girls. And then you find out you like Golden Girls, and there's something lost that you don't have that. I mean, that's just kind of any sort of change in society. There's a trade-off.
Well, I had that experience with The Gone with the Wind. It's like every time I'd had an opportunity to watch that movie, I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch that movie. But then my wife said that it was like her favorite movie growing up. And so I was like, well, I want to watch this with you. And she was going to watch it. And I just loved the heck out of that movie and all of its problematic parts.
There is not a guy my age who can't say they don't like Golden Girls and that they didn't catch it from sick days, sitting there eating some little like Eggo waffles or chicken noodle soup, watching.
I don't know what you're talking about. That must be your age. I was watching Beverly Hillbillies, The Addams Family, and the Batman show from the 60s or whatever.
It was our age, but it's partially because it depended on what was television, what was your offerings. You know what I mean? Because we knew that we were sitting there on that day and there was nothing but soap opera, Golden Girls. So it was just the time frame that you were there, you know? And
I don't think I was ever homesick.
You weren't allowed to.
Perfect attendance.
Price is Right.
I remember
Bonnie's
having
got it right. That's where you get
chickenpox.
the Price is Right too. Yeah.
All right. So what do we have to look forward to the next week? Anything on the horizon?
We still need to do a review of Everything Everywhere All at Once or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Promise we're going to do that. But then each week gets loaded up with like, there's so much stuff that pops up every single time. But I kind of go nuts. Like yesterday, I was telling you, I listened to on the show, Kara. Then I listened to Dan.
You listen to that at work? How do you find time for all that crap?
Well, I just always have kind of earphones on, and most of my work, like people come in and come out, but most of my work's just kind of sitting at a computer doing that sort of stuff. And then I have a long commute every single day. I'm getting stuck in snow and that. Then I go to the gym and I just have earphones on in the gym. Then I walk Charlie and I just have earphones on with Charlie, and I listen to everything in double speed. So I pump through a lot in a day. But yesterday, I just kind of really felt like I just listened to 15 in a row that I didn't want to listen to. I was like, but including Noah Harari's Sapiens. Oh my God!
I had a success this week. This will be my last thing. Then I should probably go to bed because I have to go to work. I had a conversion success this week. It's the most important conversion success I've had in a long time, and that was that I got my brother addicted to Yu-Gi-Oh. I found a way, because he was like, I hate card games, and I was like, listen, I found a way to incentivize him to learn it. So he's like, okay, fine, I'll learn it, whatever. And then he was over, and I taught him the basics of it. And his daughter was like, I want to learn too. So then they went home, I gave him the stuff, and then he called me the next day, and he's like, John, I want to thank you so much for teaching me this game, because I had struggled to find something to connect with my daughter over, and she loves this game, and I really love it too, and now we're like beating each other with these duels, and then my other daughter now wants to do it. And so then today I talked to him, and he's like, I spent all day watching YouTube videos and playing the game, and I've just,
That's awesome.
if you want an opportunity to connect with your kids on something that's fun, and there's a community of Yu-Gi-Oh players, like the card shops, like every evening these kids are together.
Yeah, and speaking of that sort of stuff, a criticism of so many right-wing things, because they sneer at video games and they sneer at all stuff like, you should be adult, you shouldn't be doing all that stuff. Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda's coming out.
Yes.
And I will be in constant contact with my nephews about that, because we'll be playing it and we'll be doing it. And that's like a moment where, the stupid thing that you're supposed to be over as an adult. Well, yeah, I don't really
We're
ever
super
get
excited
with
for
my
it.
nephews, because so
yeah, those little things that you can do to connect with people, I think it is important, and I'm seeing the importance of that more each day, and connect in real life, not on necessarily phones if you can manage it. So
Or stupid internet. Like, who are you people? I don't know you people. You're not in my real life.
I've seen you in person once.
Once.
Yeah, at that debate that is so famous.
Midnight Mormon RFM debate. I hope that's not a one and done thing. Like, I really hope.
No. I don't think they're going to do it again. But this debate thing, we do have to make happen somewhere. Like, so you've said multiple times on this episode that that people like Dan don't engage with other people. But hey, where's you engaging directly with Dan? You should challenge him to a debate.
And I was sending text messages and all that stuff to the thing. You just get like squashed. But I'm also nobody. But I tried to call into that.
Maybe I should work a little harder. I feel like I have the connections. I should be able to set that up.
Yeah, he's doing guest shots. He's doing guest spots on stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think Dan would like take a debate like format on stuff. But,
no.
Yeah.
He doesn't engage even like the slightest bit of general criticism, and I know that he's protective of. I'm sure he's protective on if he's an actual believer in Mormonism or not.
Yeah.
And,
well, maybe we just need to do like a Streeter Jacob Hansen debate then. That would be interesting for people.
well, you got RFM and Bill thinking about doing that, right? No,
I don't think that's gonna happen. RFM and Bill.
The video I started out with, listen to the whole entire thing, because he goes into detail about why that's a problem. You can't entertain Slytherin. You entertain Slytherin, and you'll foment their ideas, and they'll become Death Eaters again. And that's a part of the paradigm of the academic.
Wait, what's your point of bringing that up right now? Is that
the rest of that video talks about why they will only talk about not two people who.
Well, I'm hoping I hit a technical stumbling block in making my little app that I want to make that's going to allow me to do what Peter Boghossian is calling spectrum epistemology, where you can have viewers step on a line and we'll see a grid, and then you have a discussion, and then you can see in real time where people have moved on their position. So when I get that in a better position, I think it'll be a fun way to host debates or do things like that.
That'll be awesome too, but you'll have to get people who, because Boghossian gets people who kind of aren't really aware of what he's doing, but I bet you couldn't get people who are more of that ideological academic class to talk about it. Because even Boghossian talks about in his NPR episodes, they only ever get, like, they talk about Christian nationalism, they'll get an expert on Christian nationalism, they won't talk to a Christian nationalist.
Yeah.
They talk to people who can tell you about it, but not to the people who are the true believers of stuff, supposedly. So,
all right. Well, with that, I better say bye.
It was a fun one. Thanks for coming on. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be a porch time bro.
Oh, yeah.
All right, take care.
See ya.
Later.